Somebody's got a long ride home tonight. It's gonna be a long 30 miles.
I do it all the time.
That's
In
right.
the snow.
Yep.
Coming from Bedford, Mass. I do it a lot.
196. Okay, thank you. Okay.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm good. Okay, we're all ready? Okay. I'll call this meeting to order. Please rise. Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. We have the roll call, please, Twyla.
Certainly. Counselor Garrison. Counselor Lunt is excused. I think Counselor Garrison's on his way. Counselor McTevier.
Here.
Counselor Bickford.
Here.
Counselor Ward.
Here.
Counselor Pesky.
Here.
And Counselor Brunel.
Here.
And the first item, please.
First item is good news and recognition.
Okay, I have a couple things, but if there's, I'm going to cheat and look at my notes here. I know that this past weekend was the father and daughter dance. The folks at Positive Change Lisbon let us know that it went extremely well, was very well attended, and they were really happy to see so many wonderful couples. We also, I can't read my notes, I'm sorry. We also need to thank and congratulate Mark Stevens. He has completed 20 years of coaching wrestling here in Lisbon, just this past weekend at the state finals, and all the kids did very well there, including his own son, and took state champs. Lisbon placed third overall, and I didn't have a chance to verify that because of so much going on with the weather, but I'm pretty sure that we're all proud of the entire wrestling team and extremely grateful for Mark's dedication and hard work. And then also Positive Change Lisbon held a business strategy seminar, successful business strategy seminar. It was the first one. They had a really great presentation about time management, and there were several local businesses who attended, and everyone there seemed to find it very informative. They plan to hold these meetings each quarter at the community school, and their website will have details. So I thank the folks at Positive Change and Ross for passing on the information so we can let everyone know. Okay.
The sleigh rides were held this weekend, and I did not attend because I had to work and attend the fire. But
Yep.
I guess they had a very good turnout, so I'm very happy for the sleigh rides. And I did hear that they sold more donuts than they'd ever sold before.
Donuts are good food in the winter.
Yeah, right.
Anytime.
I just quickly want to recognize the fire department for their response to the fire at the Public Works garage over the weekend. It could have been a lot worse than what it was, but we have a great fire department, and thank you for the firefighters for all you do here in Lisbon.
Definitely. It was an extremely quick response, and everyone did a really great job. All right, if we're ready to move on. Next item, please, Twyla.
Public hearings, a special entertainment permit for Sandra Harkins doing business as the Railroad Restaurant and Pub.
I'll open this hearing. Do we have anyone who needs to speak? Okay. We'll close the hearing. And the next item, please, Twyla.
Is audience participation.
Okay. This is where folks who have notes or questions or comments about any items on the agenda may speak. Do we have anyone?
Ross Cunningham, Lisbon Falls. I just want to comment briefly. I understand tonight you guys will be receiving a presentation from the 196 Master Plan, and I want to appreciate you guys giving this the time it deserves. I know that there will be stuff in the presentation that involves investment, and I know that that's a hard pill to swallow sometimes, but I think it's important that we look at these plans that the folks have worked so hard on and that we all worked hard on in the beginning, trying to develop this committee, and really think about where our town wants to be and how we get there. We're not going to get there for free. I think it's important that, I know that there's discussion about a sidewalk that's needed to continue the walking trail, and I think that's of the utmost importance. If you're going to try and get people off the walking trail into downtown Lisbon Falls, you got to do it safely. And so I just wanted to sort of throw my opinion in here that as you consider this plan they're putting forward, that you really think about the long-term vision for Lisbon and not just about the dollars, because I think it's really important to put our town first. Thanks.
Thank you, Ross. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak?
Madam Chairman, Dot Fitzgerald, resident of Lisbon Falls. I appreciate what Ross Cunningham had to say. This master plan, and we've had a town planner for 2 years now, and it's time for budget season. This is costing $20,000 a year plus expenses. I'm wondering, what budget does the town planner come in under? Does anyone know?
Which department it comes under?
Yeah.
Uh, Go ahead, Dennis. Dennis? Yep. Yep, it's a line item under.
Does anyone have an idea what the actual expenses are over and above the $20,000 a year salary?
We might be able to give you that answer if we have time to do the homework later.
Okay. Also, you're recognizing someone for a 100th birthday, which is wonderful. Kennebec Store has been in continuous business under the same family for over 100 years, and the town just has failed to recognize it. So I would like to recognize Frank Anicetti and the Kennebec Store for being in business in the same family for 101 years this year. That is an amazing accomplishment.
Thank you, Dot. Do we have anyone else? Okay. We'll go to the next item.
Audience response?
Okay. I think the only question that we really need to answer is Dot's question. Maybe, Dot, you could either email or give Mr. Olmsted a call so that you can ask your question and make sure that we get an answer for you. Okay, thank you. And we'll move on to the next item, please.
Is the consent agenda. Order 2014-26 to approve the special entertainment permit and a liquor license for Sandra Harkins doing business as the Railroad Restaurant and Pub, and the minutes of February 4, 2014.
Make a motion to accept.
Second.
All those in favor?
Order passed, 5-0.
Thank you. And the next item, please.
Is under Council Orders, Resolutions, and Ordinances, Order 2014-27, the executive search proposals.
Okay. We need to have a motion before we begin discussion, is that correct? Or can we discuss first?
We've been informally discussing them and then doing the motions if you like.
Okay,
That's
I think
fine,
we
so.
should. Last time we met, we discussed the three different groups that were offering their services for us. And Mr. Olmsted, you did get us some information. Would you like to give us a little summary?
I would. After the last council meeting, I contacted the three firms who submitted proposals. We received a response from Eaton Peabody about the question that we asked was, in addition to your fee, your base fee, what are your reimbursables or out-of-pocket expenses look like? And the answer from Eaton Peabody was, and I'll just quickly get down through it, they estimate between direct costs would be between $200 and $300. Criminal background checks for each finalist, they anticipate 2, would be $100. Printing, binders, and so on would be $50 to $80. They will not charge for mileage reimbursement. And I think the reason for that is one lives in Lewiston, one lives in Brunswick, so they're next door. And they estimate that advertising costs will be $450. And let me explain that all three are proposing to advertise the opening in similar fashions. They would advertise in the ICMA, International City Managers Association website, which gives you national, international exposure, actually, because it includes England and Canada. They would advertise on the Maine Municipal Association website, which would give them statewide exposure. And then they would list the ad on the town website. In searches like this, very few advertise in the paper these days because the internet gives you much broader exposure. So it looks like, including advertising, Eaton Peabody would not exceed $1,000 in out-of-pockets and other expenses. Maine Municipal Association, and also I asked each of them if they would extend or offer a warranty, if you will, on the hiring of a new manager. And Eaton Peabody said that they would do that, if a new manager isn't successful and leaves the position within a year of hire, the date of hire, that they would conduct a new search at no cost, with the exception of out-of-pocket expenses. Dave Barrett of MMA I estimated that, I think David's saying that the only real expense they would have above the base fee is advertising, which they anticipate to be $900. So I suspect the difference in Eaton Peabody and MMA's proposal is that MMA would propose an advertisement probably in the Portland Press Herald. That's my guess. But they will not extend the warranty. They will not guarantee that, or they will not provide a free additional search if the manager that's hired does not work out. And then I looked at the third, which was MRI, a firm that I'm personally not familiar with, but they are estimating that their out-of-pockets would generally run between $1,000 and $1,500, which could or could not include paying for travel expenses for the finalists.
What about they're the ones who initially brought up the idea of a warranty?
Yes, they along with Eaton Peabody, would provide that one-year warranty. MMA would not.
Okay. Any comments or discussion from council? I think,
Kind of narrowed it down,
yep.
I think.
So it brings municipal resources and Eaton Peabody at about the same price.
Very close.
With the
With both a guarantee.
with the warranty. MMA, I think that having a warranty was important for us. I think that we all expressed that. So I think it's a decision that we'll have to base on who we felt more compelled by, who we thought would work better with us. Open to.
I personally don't think I don't think you go wrong with either one of them, with Eaton Peabody or MRI. But MRI being out of New Hampshire, and there could be additional costs with them traveling, I think in the long run, I think we're going to be better with Eaton Peabody. Personally, that's my opinion.
You want to make a motion on that?
Somebody will second it.
Would you like to make a motion?
I'd make a motion that we accept Eaton Peabody.
You already accepted it.
I will second it.
We got a motion.
Do we need any further discussion? Okay. The motion is to choose, to accept Eaton Peabody's proposal to do our manager search with us. All those in favor?
Order passed, 5-0.
Thank you. And the next item, please, Twyla.
Order 2014-28, kill attainment request for use of town property for filming.
Okay. Mr. Olmsted, do you know any, you know more about this, that's right.
I'm anxious to learn about it.
Yes.
We all are. Good evening. My name is Tracy Stuber, Economic and Community Development Director. And before you, you have a request from Kill Attainment Films. They are looking to do some filming for a full-length movie here in Lisbon. And in that request, they are asking for street closure, looking from the Kennebec store up to Union Street. And if this would be done in the evening hours when businesses are not open, so it would not interfere with any of the businesses. They will work with the downtown businesses as well, with the opportunity to use their storefronts in the footage as well as logos, giving them exposure during the film. They will also use Union Street, and that would be for a vehicle coming up through, with the understanding that if there are any emergencies with the fire department, they are to move off to the side and allow for emergency vehicles to pass, so that would not interfere. That street would not be closed. They met with both Chief Brooks and I, and we went through any concerns. They were also looking to use the police department for some of their scenes, and have a Lisbon police vehicle stationed out front, as well as utilizing office space inside and uniforms, a couple of the uniforms. Here before you, I do have the producer, which is Alan Dillingham, and Seth Roberts, who is the director of the movie, as well as I've asked Chief Brooks to be here for any questions.
Great. So the gentleman, would you like to come up to the podium in case anybody has any questions?
I'm Alan. I'm the producer of the film and owner of Kill Attainment. That's Seth Roberts. He's the director. That's Seth Roberts. He's the director of the film.
We're in a movie, too. I just want to clarify, I think I read this in the letter that you sent us, but any storefronts or logos that you use would be with the, additionally with the permission of those business owners?
Well,
right?
legally, we're bound to get owner permission to show their storefronts. So if we get approval from the council, one of the first things we do is get together and go and visit the business owners, kind of explain to them who we are and what we'd like to do, give them an opportunity to have their storefronts or logos placed on the film. If they object, then we will work our camera angle so as not to capture their storefronts.
Okay.
Our big thing is to utilize that street for one evening and be community friendly. We don't want to upset anyone.
Right.
We certainly don't want to upset your business. And she explained to us the fire station that's right there.
Right.
So our logistics would set up so that if there is an emergency, they're not waiting for us to clear things out. They would be able to do their job without any hesitation.
Okay. Any counselors have any questions?
Yeah, I do. Just curious, why'd you choose Lisbon?
I'm actually, I live in Durham, so I'm always here. And about a year ago, we started coming up with the idea, and it was just natural to come up with a small town that I knew, and it seemed like it made sense. So.
And to clarify, this isn't a love story, right?
No.
It didn't look like it.
If you'd like, we can kind of go into it a little bit for you. It is a creature movie, but it's not about the creatures. It's about a small band of family and friends who refuse to give up their town and surrender to what's going on. So they stay and they fight for their town, and that's really the premise of it all: is fighting for what you believe in and fighting for what you want to protect. Lisbon has that sense of community, especially that street. You can see the age there. You can see sincere people there, and that's what we hope to capture in the film. We didn't just grab Lisbon at random. We always kind of observe the communities we'd like to film in and see if there's going to be a sense of realism that we can portray, so that when somebody sees the scenes involving Lisbon, they certainly believe that it is a community-orientated town.
Great. I love monster movies.
So some of the things that we're offering you, I know that's in the letter, we'd like to capture the town of Lisbon's sign. We'd like to use your
Saw
police
that.
uniforms. We'd like to use your police cars, anything that's going to say Lisbon, Maine. We'd like to hold some auditions for some of the creatures here using Lisbon citizens, get the community involved, and give the community a private screening once the film is ready.
Great.
Just to say kind of, thank you for supporting.
Oh, yeah. We have a almost drive-in movie theater in the summer.
Sit in.
Sit in.
Sit in.
We sit on the lawn. Any other questions or comments from council, or?
When do you plan on making the movie or shooting it? Do you have exact dates?
We have a proposed schedule.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Yeah,
saw
Is it
that.
there?
Yeah, it's towards the end, I think.
What we will do, however, is, based on your permission, is we're kind of tenuous with our dates right now, because we need a solid permission from the town. The next step, if we have a yes, is to get that insurance policy that we need to present to the
Yeah,
town.
I saw that.
Right,
Yeah,
same here.
and then we will email Tracy as our point of contact and have her share it with you on the proposed dates, and then get permission from the town to use those exact dates,
Okay,
giving time to go and speak to the business owners and let them know what's going on.
okay.
I understand it takes place in the winter, so I don't think you have anything to worry about anytime soon.
We were a little worried when we first scouted it because you had almost no snow. Now that problem is solved, so we can move forward with filming.
Okay. So we are looking for a motion to allow Killattainment the use of town property for filming.
Make the motion.
I'll second it.
All those in favor?
Order passed, 5-0.
Thank you. We'll look forward to seeing you work.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and our next item, please, Twyla.
Is the proclamation, Order 2014-29, happy 100th birthday to Lisbon's Gold Post Cane recipient, Mrs. Stella Carville.
We have a proclamation to read, and I'm just going to read it, and then we can go on from there. Proclamation from the Town Council. Whereas Mary Stella Carville was born in Fall River, Massachusetts on January 7, 1914, to Rose and Albert Rodzin, and whereas she moved to Lisbon at the age of 13 with her family, who settled into a farm on the Ridge Road, and whereas at the age of 15 she began working in the shoe factory as a stitcher, and whereas later fell in love with the boy next door, Lester Carville, who she married on July 24, 1935, at the age of 21, raising 6 children, and whereas Stella spent a lot of years tending the livestock, operating a dairy, selling turkeys and eggs, harvesting the hay, raising food in the garden, canning vegetables and fruit, and whereas Stella, over the years, became known as a great cook, making applesauce donuts, outstanding bagels, and the best Bismarcks. And whereas Stella continues to enjoy the ever-changing farm life where she continues to live today in her own home, and whereas Stella Mary Carville turned 100 years old on January 7, 2014. And now, therefore, we, the Lisbon Town Council, would like to wish Mary Stella Carville a very happy 100th birthday. Happy birthday. I had the opportunity to meet Mrs. Carville when we presented her with the Gold Post Cane Award, and she's an interesting and lovely woman, and a lot can be. It's a good story. Her own children and grandchildren and her whole family who were around her really tell a lot about what a wonderful woman she is, and we're fortunate to have people like Stella as members of our community. Thank you. And we'll sign this.
Yeah, and a motion?
Do we have a motion to accept this proclamation?
Make the motion to accept the proclamation.
I'll second it.
All those in favor?
Order passed, 5-0.
Thank you. Next item, please.
Is under other business, the Route 196 Master Plan Subcommittee presentation.
Thank you.
Good evening, Madam Chair, Councilors, Town Manager. Tonight, we're actually going to go over some items. some time back, we actually had done some work in town, and it was developing the 196 master plan. And just to give you a little background as we're putting up the presentation up on the screen so people can follow along, there's a few things that led into this master plan being developed. One, when I had the privilege serving on the council some years ago, not some years ago, but a few years back, there was a big question about a lot of the zoning on 196. There was a couple of circumstances where we actually had to rezone a couple of the areas to adapt to different businesses. And through that discussion, we actually really noticed that we didn't have really a long-term plan for the zoning and how 196 was going to be implemented and actually how it was going to develop. Through that process, there was a lot of questions, and after rezoning a couple of areas, when we were on the council, we kind of made a promise that we were going to take a long-term look of the zoning on 196, and if there's areas that needed to be changed to actually help better develop the town, that we needed to change them. And part of that was looking at a master plan. After that, there was a presentation that Ross put on, that PLC had put on, where we actually had developers from communities around us come in and give us a honest opinion of what they see when they drive 196 in Lisbon Falls. And I'll probably make a note, and Ross would too, it was a painful night because people were very painlessly, they actually gave us their honest opinions of what they've seen coming through 196, starting at our gateways and going through, and what proposed, if you had a proposed business to come in, what they would actually see driving through if they wanted to build in Lisbon. And one of the big things the developers told us that night is, when you go into a community that actually has a plan, it's easy to see what the future is. Lisbon had no plan. I mean, if a developer was to come in and want to do a multi-million-dollar business, there was no way besides the idea of talking to locals what people planned. What that night kind of led us to believe, too, is we needed to have a 196, not just a 196, but a master plan in place. And just to give a little background on a master plan would be something that if someone from outside of the community was to come in, they could go to the town office and say, could I see your master plan? They would be given a master plan, and it would actually not just tell about Lisbon, but actually promote what Lisbon wants to do in the future. That plan would be the idea of how our zoning is, why we put the zoning where it is, the improvements we plan on making, not just on our infrastructure in 196, but the idea of our design standards, our schools, so someone can actually see if they're going to invest in the community has a plan. So we actually, with the help of the good staff in Lisbon, we actually had taken on staff, someone to help us with this, because there's a lot to do with making this plan. We had actually took on staff, not on staff, but actually contracted out to Amanda Bunker, that actually came on. She was a professional planner that actually helped us work through the steps of getting this plan together. The plan wasn't something that was shortly put together. There was a lot of meetings, a lot of presentations, a lot of public input. We're talking, if you add all the people together, thousands of hours went together in this to actually put this plan together. There was a lot of community input, and there was a lot of decisions made on what the community would like to see on 196, and not just the idea of what they'd like to see, but how it would be regulated, or actually the design standards we put in place to try to make that happen. So, I mean, that was pretty much how it started. Back in December of 2013, the 196 subcommittee started working, and we started meeting once the plan was put in place. The big concern that we had as volunteers and people putting on this as a community was there's been a lot of studies done in the past, a lot of plans that actually when they get done, they just get put on the shelf, and it's just another book to go look at. Nothing ever happens out of it. And we really didn't want this. There was way too much invested in this to actually let that happen. So the subgroup committee has been working really hard, and I'm really privileged to say that some of the councilors come to the meetings and very involved, and that's what we really need to be. I'm going to click that one. Sure, it'd be easier. Thank you. Some of the priorities that actually was looked at, and again, this was come through with some of the meetings, was the idea that the visuals and what you see and how it works when you actually come through Lisbon. Not just meaning the roads, but actually where the sidewalks, crosswalks, our connection to our trails, how we're using our waterfront. Lisbon has a lot of great opportunities, but what most people say is when they drive through, they don't really see that pulling through. They actually would like to actually use that in a way that we could use to sell our town. So we looked at the improvements, including just treescape, the trail connections, intersection improvements, the facade, working with our businesses in town to actually promote the idea of making things look better. And it doesn't take a whole lot to make things look better, but kind of our design standards were led that way to try to, if there's new businesses come in town, that we actually set the standard of what we'd like to see. Develop a plan for a TIF district so we can actually try to get the most help we can for the businesses. The streetscape, sidewalks. And when we talk about the programs, it's very important to realize that some of the areas we look at is what we have two downtowns. We have the Lisbon Falls downtown and the Lisbon Village. And both of them are going to be equally as important moving forward. So when we start looking at talking about sidewalks, improvements for new businesses, it's on both ends of towns, because both ends of towns really need to be brought up to make that work. And again, some of the planning initiatives, the design standards, Dennis and the group and the planning board have been working on design standards, and I'm really privileged to say that if someone was to come to our planning board today and come forward with it as a plan for new business, that we actually have people in place and we have the professionals behind it to really make that work and actually be very, how would I say, business friendly, if there's such a thing, for our planning board. Some of the facts, again, that was a neat way of saying that we have a lot of opportunities in our town to make things better. How's that? A lot of opportunities. And you don't have to go very far to see them. And a lot of them, unfortunately, it's not that anybody has done something wrong. The town actually hasn't done anything wrong. Just over a period of time, things change. And one of those things are the improvements of our sidewalks, how we actually walk amongst the town, walk around the town, and actually how we connect. Again, 196, how that merges goes through our Lisbon downtown and through our Lisbon Village is going to be really important. Now, we actually try to make these areas look the best we can to try to generate want for businesses to come. We actually have some opportunity in our Lisbon Village with some destruction, I should say, buildings coming down. That's going to allow opportunity for new business to come in. And some of the sidewalk improvement up there would be really important if we get new businesses in to actually make them have a nice location to put a new business. Potential funding. One of the hardest things about any of these projects, and that's why one of the reasons we're staying out in front of you tonight, is none of this will happen if you don't invest in your town. The idea of actually having a lot of extra money out there as far as for state grants and funding, it's tough to get today. We've got to work really hard to get it. We have the people on staff and with Amanda to actually write grants to try to get potential funding. But a lot of our base stuff that we're going to do is actually going to have to be funded from within. As tough as that is, I realize as a council when it comes to budgetary items, but it'd be really sad to see all the hard work that went into this plan to have it not be implemented in some manner within the first year to try to keep the momentum going. And we actually have some pretty good ideas on how some of the first projects we're looking at. There are some grants availabilities out there. With any grants, as you move forward with the council, you're going to see on different levels where grants actually are a great thing, but typically there's some type of matching funding. Some of the grants that we'd be looking at is at least a 25% match, meaning if you get a $100,000 grant, you've got to have $25,000 out front sitting aside before you apply for that to make sure that you can get it. Some of the grants we're looking at, we're up to a $400,000 grant, which we realize would be very tough to get $100,000 to put aside to actually sit in the kitty waiting to potentially get a grant. But I think we do have to start somewhere, and part of that is actually having a plan, whether it's the idea of the village sidewalk, downtown. We actually have to have a plan in place and actually have it engineered before we can move forward with the idea of doing those plans. One of our first items that we're looking at is the idea down in our downtown. We actually have a trail system that is probably second to none, I think, when it moves through our village as we have it right now. It connects to our downtown village in Lisbon. It goes by one of our community schools. It goes down by a walking path by the river, and now it's actually going to be linked and go down by the Androscoggin. One of the things that we're a little bit concerned about, and I know speaking with Ross and a lot of the people that are down in the Main Street area, we actually had a business forum just a while back at the town office, and most of the people that are on Main Street, their biggest drive was you need to promote and bring people to our businesses. I was really excited as this trail goes through because I want to actually be able to get on the trail and walk down past the high school, down by the Androscoggin. The unfortunate thing about our trail system, because of funding, the trail stops. If you can actually see this picture out front here, this is actually down close to the river. If you were to go to the left, you would actually see the high school. Where we're looking at there is actually Davis Street. Davis Street connects onto 196. Our trail is going to stop right at the end of Davis Street, which, if any of you are familiar with what we would call the Koodle, basically when you get to the end of the trail, you'll be able to kind of like do the National Lampoon. Yep, we made it to the end of the trail, turn around and walk back, which is really unfortunate for our businesses. You can see our downtown from there, but unfortunately you can't connect to our downtown there safely. So one of the things that we're going to present tonight is the idea of actually extending that sidewalk from the end of Davis down to 196, and we've already worked on getting some safer traffic controls to be able to cross 196. So people at the end of the trail will be able to connect to our downtown to actually help support our local businesses, whether they're going to the library or if they're going to buy some sausage or just to visit our downtown. I was told by Noise Lawrence, I'm not sure how many of you guys know Noisy, that possibly up to 40,000 people a year visit our trail system. And we talk about Moxie Days having tens of thousands of people in town help promote business. It would really be a shame that tens of thousands of people would get to the end of that road and not connect down to our downtown without having that trail system. So to me, it's a really important part. We actually have we've done a lot of work as far as with that sidewalk, figuring out the cost. Tracy and Dennis and Ryan have put together some numbers. And again, yep, go right ahead. And a lot of it doesn't come cheap. First thing, Don's up here with me, the town would not be in the place it is right now as far as for planning board or for this 196 master plan if it wasn't for Amanda Bunker. I actually, sitting on council, really questioned the idea of hiring an outside planner to come in. But I tell you what, it's actually been worth every penny. And moving forward, as some people may disagree, for what we pay to actually have her services, we can never afford anybody to be on staff to actually do the same thing she does. She brings a lot of professionalism, a lot of knowledge, a lot of connections, and we would just not be where we are today at the level with our planning board or our 196 master plan if it wasn't for her knowledge of doing this in the past. And we're a long ways from home. We have a lot of work to do when it comes to getting grants and trying to implement the process. Again, it would be really a shame that we put all this forward, got it on paper, and got a plan ready without actually doing something to move it forward. So, again, I'm not sure if, Don, you want to speak on that a little bit as far as Amanda before we move forward?
It's Fern's job to embellish upon things and make them really pretty for you to see, and they really should be pretty before you. It's my job to cut to the chase and tell you that I'd like to prove some business people wrong in the town. When Dennis and I walked around just before one of our public forums, and we were talking to business owners about how they felt about a master plan, and I heard it more than once. We've done this before. We've spent more money on paper that we put on a shelf and never did anything about. I'd like to prove those people wrong. I'd like to make something happen with this. And one of our key elements to that is Amanda Bunker. As you know, she's worked with all the public forum. She's worked with the Master Planning Committee, and she's been essential to making the planning board actually work. Some time ago, a couple of years ago, we took it upon our own to develop bylaws for the planning board. Now, it was not an easy job to develop bylaws for the planning board because you had all these state laws to go by, the local laws, the charter, the ordinances, you name it. And she and I sat down together and hammered out, talked at each other, complained to each other, and said some nice things to each other, but we got them done. And those stand today as testament to the fact that she was a tremendous help to me and as a result to the planning board. What she's done also, as you've heard it, all these steps right here have come out of her mouth. So I can't say enough about a planning person and particularly her. To answer some other question about that, for $20,000 a year, which Fern can attest to, she won't go below, or the firm she works for won't go below. For $20,000 a year, we'd get a contract planner. For $20,000 with no other expenses, none, zip, no other expenses. The only thing that I can tell you that might have been expended beyond the $20,000 was a platter that we bought out of the town manager's funds to have one night at one of our public forums. Other than that, there's no transportation, no reimbursable expenses. And although I can't speak from the finance director's point of view, I'm pretty sure I'll get backed up right there. I was also at the PCL meeting that invited the business members from particularly the Brunswick-Topsom area. And I was right there when they said, we wouldn't consider moving to town if you didn't have a plan. We wouldn't consider moving to town if you don't have design standards. Well, we don't have design standards, but we're almost there. And that's something that Amanda has been really hard charging on and working hard with us. Do you want to talk about the 65,000?
I can do that if you
Okay.
want. Yep.
We both can, so we'll share.
Absolutely. Again, the $20,000 that we use to, I would say, invest in our town when it comes to the planning board and what she's done to me has actually been very, very well spent. And I'd only encourage the council to actually look at that. It's already in this year's budget, and I hopefully it continues to stay there because it's needed. The other items, just to kind of wrap this up so you can move forward to the rest of presentations. Some of the funding that's looked in this, the $20,000 for the consultant for that, that's a mandate. I mean, that's already, it's been in your previous budgets for the last couple of years, and hopefully it maintains. The sidewalk that's actually needed to complete the Davis Street, we've actually looked at the figures, tried to round them out the best way we can, and it looks like that is about a $65,000 figure to connect that sidewalk. There's some lighting that would be needed, but that's actually something that we believe that Ryan has already taken care of, actually secured the idea of some safety crosswalk devices that would actually help us if they got to that point.
There's a crosswalk that we have at the school right now. The idea, we have another one coming at some time here in the next month or two or three. And the idea is to erect that at the intersection of Davis Street and 196, and there's no charge to the town for that either. And the idea would be to be able to connect this trail with that.
So the $65,000, what we're going to ask the council to do is to potentially look at this year's budget to see if we can actually pull that $65,000 forward to actually make it work. And we realize that $65,000 is a lot of money. What we do also realize is if the town of Lisbon doesn't invest in itself, and people don't see that investment, that I mean, a lot of good people's times basically will go to waste because it won't really continue to move forward. It's a needed item as much as when you're actually seeing the repair to the front of the high school. Even though it wasn't a drastic repair, it was a very visual repair. People had seen it, they appreciated it, and they got excited about things that could come forward. The other part of the request is going to be for money to be put aside for potentially we can go for grants. Typically the town, from what I've been part of in the last few years, have actually put very little money aside to have matching grants. And it's very hard for any department, whether it's public safety or our group, to actually promote for grants if we don't have money. We would actually like to see $50,000 put aside for possible matching grants. The money would actually not be spent unless there was actually an actual grant, being 25% of the grant. So we'd be looking at possibly get a $200,000 grant. That grant would be to help improve the sidewalks up in the Lisbon Village, and actually some sidewalks down into our other downtown area, just to promote the idea of the walkability and safety, and promote that we're trying to make things look for business to expand. So altogether, again, the $65,000 for the Davis Street, the sidewalk, and then also the $50,000 to be put aside for grant match. And again, I guess I can't express enough that as a budget that we see that we move forward with, if we don't actually put money aside to try to invest in our town, no one's going to. I mean, it really comes down to the point of the idea of making dedication to do that. Does council have any questions? I'd be more than happy to answer any questions that I can.
Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Fellows or Fern?
Again, I know it's not always an easy thing to do when it comes to budgetary items, but if we don't ask, we won't get.
One of the things on the CDBG front, or on the $50,000 front, was it had talked about going forward this year we would have had a letter, I believe by the end of January would have had to been in, and we could have made that, but the funding wasn't right and the timing wasn't right, and we think that we should take our time and go after it next January. So that thought is out there, and you can't get free money. You've got to have backup money. So that's what the $50,000 would help with.
All set. Thank you for your time. We do appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you for our assistance.
That's what I'm here for.
Can somebody put the lights on for us, or do we still need them off, Tracy?
Depends on the next presentation. Who's the next one?
Our next item, Twyla?
Is the library department presentation?
I see you made it safely.
I started a 3-hour drive at 2:30.
Oh, we're glad you made it.
And for the record, roads are not fun. They're having enough trouble keeping up with the main roads, the side roads.
Can we take 1 second?
Need the mic down?
That's up to the council.
You thinking being able to see?
All towns have master plans like this. Probably.
Good evening, members of the Town Council, Town Manager, and Lisbon citizens. I thank you for this opportunity to give you an update on the Library Department this evening. With me is former staff member Renata Shark. She's moved on to a successful IT career. She spent her college years with me and helped me prepare this, so I promised her if we got the opportunity to do this, and so I thank her for being out in the snowstorm and being my assistant tonight. The mission statement of the library is as follows. The department of the Town of Lisbon is to select, organize, and preserve a book, materials, media, and data collection, which is freely available to all residents of the Town of Lisbon within the constraints of space and budget. The Library Department, per Lisbon Ordinance, Section 18-31, mandates a 5-member library governing board that is appointed by the Town Council. They serve 3-year terms and can be reappointed by the Council. The current members of the board are Richard Golden, the chairman, Claire Paquette, Ralph Day, Sally Lund, and Jessica Meekin. They meet the second Wednesday of every month at the library, and all meetings are open to the public. I then file a report to Twyla's office for her documents. The board reviews the library director's monthly report and circ stats. And one of their important jobs is to review and adopt library policies as needed to ensure that all policies reflect our community's needs. They also assist the library director in working on and submitting a suggested library department every January. And of course, this is presented to town officials for review and adoption. The library has 6 staff members currently. We have 4 full-time staff people and 2 people who share the part-time position. The library is open 47 hours per week, Monday through Saturday. The number of hours that we have compares to libraries in neighboring communities. As of January 1st, 2014, the Lisbon Library Department has 2,306 active adult patrons and 653 very active juvenile patrons. We average about 30 new patrons every month. All must provide a photo ID and a Lisbon address to qualify for a library card. This applies to juveniles as well. The parent would have the ID, and so that we verify who you are and where you live. That's important to our community, I think. We have several non-resident patrons from area towns. This is a 1-year membership at $40 a year. It's based on the portion of the tax bill that supports the library services. Governing board reviews that every 2 years. It's up for renewal with the next fiscal year. As of January 1st, 2014, at your library, you have 37,307 adult and children's books, 1,651 DVDs, 693 unabridged audiobooks, 45 magazine subscriptions, and 2 local newspapers. Libraries are certainly the place that you recognize in your community. You go for books, movies, and computers. Perhaps you're unfamiliar with other important services we provide, and I'd like to mention some of those so that we can get that information out to the Lisbon citizen. This depicts our large print collection, and that's for our customers who have impairment with vision. We have a small collection, but we borrow from the Maine State Library every month to make sure that we have a good selection for all who need it. It's also a good way of keeping the budget down because these large print are very expensive, so it's a nice way to balance that with the State Library. Our next slide features our magazine rack. As you can see, we have a real good variety, and that's the selection we offer our customers. And unlike most libraries, we continue to circulate our magazines to our patrons. The Lisbon residents appreciate the service because of the significant increase in price to their home subscriptions. They enjoy the variety that you see here, and magazines usually are returned in good shape and on time. The next slide depicts, it's not very fancy, but this is our tax form shelf that we have. And the library is the only location in Lisbon this year to provide IRS forms. The local post office is not taking part in the program this year. We are pleased to offer this to all Lisbon residents. You do not need a library card to come into the library to take tax forms home to get your work done. Unfortunately, the IRS has sent fewer numbers of each, and we'll be happy to make photocopies to ensure that everybody gets their taxes in by the deadline. Next one. This next slide shows our paperback exchange service. These two racks are in the back room. And this is a convenient service for our patrons who travel, beachgoers, and those patrons who don't like the constraints of the 3-week circulation. I got to get them back. It's the hardcover. I've got fines. So these paperbacks are not checked out through our computer system. We count them for stats only. It's almost self-sufficient. It's very seldom that I have to buy anything. Once in a while, a few westerns, a few thrillers, and a few romances. Patrons donate new and generally used paperbacks from their private collections almost on a weekly basis. We offer adult study space. This is a group from University of Southern Maine. These groups meet in the back room or in the new Career Center room when that's not in use for that purpose. Many Lisbon citizens have returned to school and college and appreciate a convenient place to meet and study away from sometimes the busy and noisy home study places they may have. They appreciate the Tuesday evenings till 7 and the Saturdays till 2 to get the studying done. We currently have 3 of such groups that study at the library on a regular basis. Before we get to this, another quick mention of a service. We are one of only 2 locations in Lisbon for photocopies and fax service for Lisbon residents, the other being Spiller's Office Supplies. The residents appreciate the convenience of 6 days to make their photocopies and send faxes for job applications, medical, and government forms. The charge for photocopies is 10 cents a page, and $2 per fax copy to match the fee charged here at the town office. Another service, without a slide because I don't know how we do that, is our Wi-Fi service for Lisbon residents with personal devices, smartphones, and laptops. Many come in with these devices and sit at the front table or the comfortable chairs, plug in and conduct their business. Many others sit in their vehicles and do the same. We have a young businessman that I mentioned in January that sits in his truck, corresponds with his customers. He's out plowing, I'm sure. He comes in every 3 weeks, uses his library card, sits at one of the hard-wired machines, and prints off his bills. And he told me he really appreciates this service and relies on it. And it's also a timely service that assists more people daily as they purchase new technology. This is the slide on book circulation. And of course, it remains a big service in our community. All those rumors that we've all heard for several years now that personal e-readers, pads, and tablets and other marvels of technology would be the demise of public libraries. The slide before you proves that wrong. These numbers continue to go up. It continues to be a popular place and vital service in our community. People rely on the library for pleasure, school, and college reading materials. Indeed, we've adjusted to the technology, but we make it work for us, so we can make it work for the patrons. One of the marvels of technology is that we take part in the statewide free e-reader download system. Our patrons are pleased to have this selection for their Kindles and e-readers. They download approximately 130 items per month currently. The next slide shows adult and juvenile DVD circulation, and you can see that it skyrocketed in 2012. This service has seen a significant increase in the 4 years that we've featured. Popular and necessary in our town. This current fiscal year, that's not reflected here, to date, we've circulated 8,699 DVDs to Lisbon residents. This represents a 25% increase from the previous year, and there's several reasons. No more local video vendors in our community, and so it becomes difficult for patrons to find movies that they'd like to watch. And of course, the economy is still a factor for many. Therefore, our 4 per household DVD checkout service has become fun and affordable entertainment. The governing board and I decided to appropriate a larger percentage of our operational fund, usually used for books, magazines, and cassettes, to now purchase new children's and adult DVDs as need and interest continues. 13% of our operational fund was spent that way last year. Then that's just a picture of some of the movies that we have available in the media room. The next slide depicts our interlibrary loan service, and our library does partake in the statewide ILL program. Lisbon residents enjoy the ease of getting books, DVDs, and materials from as close as Lewiston, Auburn, to as far as California. We share our collection, our wonderful collection, with all other Maine and New England libraries. It's a very successful and affordable program. More than 1,100 items came and went last year with this program, which represented a 3% increase from the previous year. It's affordable, reliable, and convenient. And this year we continue to see an increase. To date, 1,200 items have been received and sent that way. The next slide depicts Anita Morenius. She does the interlibrary loan for us. This is a delivery day. You see the pile that has come in there. She's going to process them on the computer and make the phone calls to the customers to come and pick up their wonderful items. This is interesting. It's just a book, but we have a lady that owns a Volkswagen Van-wagon here in town, and she wanted to restore it. Could not find a manual online, could not buy one, came to us in desperation. We did what we could. Only 2 available in the entire United States. Took us a while, but we got it from Idaho State University. And so she was very pleased and I think surprised. Don't know if she's completed her work, but the book has gone back to the college. So it's a wonderful service. Adult children's and door usage. This is the slide that features our door chime alert system, which we refer to as our patron guest counter. The system counts people that come in through the front door or make use of the children's room entrance. This slide indicates that in 2012, we saw a significant increase in the number of Lisbon residents and visitors who came through the library doors for a variety of services. It shows close to 25,000 people come through that door. We're open approximately 300 days per year, therefore that averages to about 81.5 people a day. Not sure who that half person is. We haven't met him or her yet, but we'll let you know. It shows that about 11,000 children and their families came through the children's room as well. I think this is important. It verifies not only that we're important to the community, but it also shows the importance of our Main Street location. Lots of visitors come through our doors, visiting different businesses, Moxie store. They make their way up to the library, so that's important. The next slide depicts our computer use. the residents of Lisbon continue to rely on the library for their computer needs. We began to see an increase in need when the economy declined. They began to rely on our 3 public machines for job applications, unemployment documents, and general computer needs. It's interesting to note that some of the increased service and need in 2012 was social media. That's new to us. Patrons of every age rely on our computers for Facebook, Twitter, and emails to keep in touch with family and friends these days. We will certainly do our best to keep up with our citizens' computer needs and technology needs as funds are available. The next group of slides will show our book mending service. Although it's not a direct service to the, right there, to the Lisbon citizen, I feel it's important to mention the service to the council, town manager, and Lisbon citizens as well. These slides will depict how Mrs. Medlin, our cataloger and book mender, mends an average of about 100 books a year and saves them from being withdrawn from the collection and sent to the transfer station. The savings to the library book budget, and therefore the town budget, is about $2,000 a year, and that's significant for a small library. Book mending is truly an art that Mrs. Medlin learned from a previous staff member who's now retired, who became a certified book mender. Mrs. Medlin repairs a variety of books. You just saw the Kennedy book. She was able to do the binding. This is a popular children's book. We do bindings, loose pages, torn pages. This is her at work. She's getting the book repaired. Go ahead. Not fancy, but it works. So wait on the book. In about 3 days, good as new, and the children are happy. It's interesting to know that because these books are repaired, they're not only saved from the transfer station, but a lot of them are out of print. We could not replace them if we had to. And as keepers of information, I feel it's important that we save the written word every chance we get. My report wouldn't be complete without updating you on our children's programs, because certainly they make up a big part of what we do, and these services are important to the community. The summer reading program for ages 5 to 13 is the library's best outreach program. It brings children into the library, encourages them to a beginning of lifelong relationship with our community's library. You'll see a small variation in number of summer readers, number of books they read in any given year, but we consistently reach over 100 children and their families every summer. We always focus on the children. Go ahead. For those 6 weeks, and encourage their weekly visits to the library. And we always help them with their reading needs. It is the time of year that we purchase the most children's books to encourage all ages, to ensure that children have a good selection of books. Go ahead. Most of all, we work hard to ensure that their participation is a positive learning experience. And these are just kids having fun, learning, paying attention to some of the wonderful programs, meeting friends. And you can see we consistently fill the room every Tuesday for those 6 weeks. The other program that is important to our community is our Storytime program for ages 18 months to age 5. And that program brought 1,489 children to the library last year. It's become an alternative program for families who have been impacted by the closing of Lisbon Head Start, and for those families who cannot afford private nursery school programs. Go ahead. The children learn about books, sharing, and interacting with other children. You can see them, and oh, it's too bad he left. Go ahead, that's with the fireman. It's too bad Mr. Cunningham left. That wasn't planned, but twice a year he dons his Hawaiian shirt and his guitar, and he comes and entertains the children. So shout out to Mr. Cunningham. We appreciate his time. The last slide depicts the 2 old signs that now proudly hang in the front of the library. depicts the Old Fall sign and the village library that's no longer there. They're a reminder of our past and how the residents of Lisbon always supported the libraries and were dedicated to their libraries, and continue to remind us to keep moving forward in our goals to offer timely and great library services to all the Lisbon citizens. One of the goals that we continue to have is to continue to work with technology to offer it to our customers, good books, good movies, and fun and educational programs. And of course, another ongoing goal is to keep up with the brick maintenance of our building that continues to serve our building well. Our long-term goals will always be technology, to work with the area libraries and the Maine State Library to provide affordable services to our community. And of course, our long-term goal, I should say, is to expand our facility if and when the Lisbon Fire Station becomes available. This would be more than double our space, certainly lends itself to be a library since it's a heavy-duty building and can support the weight of books. But most importantly, it would also give us the space needed to bring fun and educational children and adult programs to our community to supplement the wonderful work the Recreation Department does and the Lisbon Historical Society does also. Thank you. I'll be glad to answer your questions.
Any questions from council? I know that I stopped into the library to use their services today, and I happened to be there while the librarians were discussing how soon the 100th person of the day was going to come through the door because it was a particularly busy day. So it's nice to see so much action at our little library. Thank you very much, Diane.
Thank you.
Okay, and Twyla, our next item, please.
Is the Parks Department presentation?
Okay.
Next one over. No.
It's got to be under Jessica's.
Yeah, you gotta be next
Put
one
it right under Jessica's. There's two there.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Town Manager, Mr. Olmsted, Town Council members, and citizens of Lisbon, I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak about Beaver Park, the Parks Department, the Town Gardens, and all the wonderful work that the Parks Department does. My name is Verla Brooks. I've worked for the town of Lisbon for 30 years. Prior to the park reconstruction in 2012, my duties consisted of building, maintaining Beaver Park, and Summer Street Park. Staff consisted of myself and a seasonal part-time employee. Now the Parks Department consists of one full-time position, myself, Director of Parks, 2 seasonal full-time positions, 1 seasonal part-time, and 21 garden volunteers, also known as the Green Thumb Gang. The department responsibilities now include managing Beaver Park, which is a 337-acre family day-use park, which is open 365 days a year. Summer Street Park, which is 30 acres. 47 garden spots are managed, and we mow 38 lawns throughout the town. I thought it'd be important to give you a little history about Beaver Park. Robert Vashon owned the property originally in 1961. In 71, he sold the property to the state of Maine. At this time, the state of Maine was purchasing property for parks. Bradbury Mountain, Lily Bay, a lot of the local state parks were purchased. They spent money, they developed those parks. They ran out of money. Beaver Park never got developed. They did give the town a lease for 20 years. The town could manage the park and use it. The rec department did use it for a time. They had swimming lessons out there. The National Guard built a brick bathhouse. No one was there to maintain it. It was used, it was abused. The town put in a picnic table, they used it for bonfires. They built an outhouse, they blew it up. It became a liability to the town. The townspeople no longer wanted to support it or fund it, and it sat there and literally became a dump. The Lisbon landfill was down the road on Pinewoods Road. Contractors would go to the dump was closed, they stop at Beaver Park and dump their stuff. And the town didn't have a good feeling about the park. Then around 1979, the State Department of Parks and Recreation asked Jack Arndt, who was chairman of the Conservation Commission at that time, if there was anything that they could do for Beaver Park. Jack went to the selectmen. They told him he could do whatever he wanted, but not to ask for any money, because they would not be putting any money into the property. Jack was a retired dairy farmer. He knew how to make a dollar go a long ways, and he got permission from the state to cut wood on the Beaver Park property, something that I don't think was allowed in any other state park, but somehow Jack got that privilege. With the money he derived from cutting wood, he built a third pond, which helped the circulation in the other 2 ponds that existed, and he improved the road system. He did this as a volunteer. It cost the town nothing. Once the Conservation Commission and Jack had done everything that they could to the property that couldn't be vandalized, they went to the town council, town meeting, and asked if they could hire somebody to live and work at Beaver Park to continue their work. They approved it. They approved a budget of $25,000 and said they could hire somebody. That's when I was hired in 1983. In 1985, the state liked what was happening at the park, what the town was doing, and they gave the town Beaver Park. In 1988, Beaver Park became a certified tree farm. We work with a management plan, forest management plan, and Dave Scheibels is our forester. So from 1983 to 2014, Beaver Park has become a very valuable asset to the town of Lisbon, something that I think people of Lisbon are very proud of. This slide presentation about Beaver Park, the Beaver Park section of it anyway, wouldn't be complete without dedicating to Jack Arndt. Beaver Park would not exist today if it wasn't for Jack. His foresight, his personal commitment to make the park project work without becoming a burden to the taxpayers of Lisbon. That anyone who knew Jack would know that. He spent many hours, volunteer time of his own time. He used his own equipment. He taught me he taught me carpentry skills and forestry skills. His goal was to make Beaver Park as self-sufficient as possible. Jack and I cut trees on the property, and he used his own portable sawmill to mill the logs into lumber, and we used that lumber to build a park, and I've got a few slides of that. He passed away in 2009. The state of Maine has many state parks, but very few municipal towns have their own beaver park. Other than Thorncraig and Lewiston, which is privately owned, I don't know of any other community that has a park of 337 acres that a town maintains. When I first came to Beaver Park, this was the only structure standing. And believe me, they tried to destroy it. They shot at it. They used it for target practice. There used to be power up there. There was a transformer. Everything was destroyed. Toilets were broken. And this is what I saw when I first came to the park. And it wasn't very inviting. We got some doors from the school department they were getting rid of, and they fit the bathhouse, so we put those in. I patched up the bullet holes, put a coat of paint on it, and now we use it as a changing room on the side and storage. To build Beaver Park, my first week at work, Jack gave me an axe, a chainsaw, and a pruning saw, and told me to get to work building a park. But he stuck around and he helped. So I wanted picnic tables. We needed outhouses. We needed buildings. We needed things. So he said, well, cut some trees. We've got plenty of trees. Cut some trees. And he marked some, Forrester marked some, Barella cut, Jack cut, and then he came out with his portable sawmill, and we sawed the logs into lumber and started building the park. First building he started me on was a kiosk. Then we moved on to outhouses. We did picnic tables. We built a picnic shelter. I wasn't a carpenter. I didn't know how to build. But I told him I would try, so he took advantage of that and taught me. Then we moved on to bigger buildings, the Lone Pine Lodge. We bought the trusses for this project, but the trusses and the pressure-treated timbers were purchased. The rest of the lumber needed came from trees on the property that we cut. Or at Summer Street Park, we also cut trees there, hauled those logs to Pulsifer, he milled them, and then we brought the wood to Beaver Park. On the lower corner, you can see the building that's completed. Half of that building is my workshop. The other half is an open room where we have meetings and teach classes. When I was hired, my husband and I had purchased a mobile home, and it was placed on the park property with the intent that someday a log permanent structure would be built there for the Rangers' place. In 1992, I moved into the log cabin. I worked over 3 years building it with Jack. He didn't want it to be my park work. I had to work on the cabin when I wasn't doing other park work. So this was built on my spare time. And it was a kit that we purchased, but the kit meant the logs came with windows and doors. We had to cut the logs to fit and design it and build it. So in 1992, that was completed. I do pay rent to the town. I'm required to live at the town. I'm required to live at Beaver Park, and I also pay rent to live at Beaver Park. And I built a house. So in 2006, the park was awarded a grant from the Maine Outdoor Heritage Fund. With that grant, we were able to build a 25 by 25 machine shed, open on one end, and an open picnic shelter, which was also 25 feet by 25 feet, and 9 picnic tables. Jack was blind at this time, but he still directed us, told us what to do, and with volunteer help, the buildings went up. All the signs at the park, the trail signs, the entrance sign, I've made them. I make them at the park, usually with lumber that came from the park. Beaver Park became a certified tree farm in 1988. We've worked with the same forester, Dave Scheibels, for that whole time. Before I came, there had been, I believe, 2 thinnings of the park, and since I've been there, we've had 2 or 3. The wood lot money goes into a special account, and that's how the log cabin was built. That's how we've done big projects at the park. And the forester and the loggers know that it's a recreation area, and both can work together. Harvest is usually done in the winter. I clean up in the fall, and then I clean up the brush and stuff that's been left behind. Rarely do people complain. If they ask questions, I explain it's a garden. It has to be weeded, otherwise you'll lose your trees. So we've never had problems with, I think. Beaver Park offers many activities, a lot of different things we can do. An outline, we do trails, wildflower walk, picnicking, swimming, tot lot, and I'll show different slides of all these different activities that occur at the park. Our hiking trails, there's approximately 10 miles. I mow them in the fall. I have a tractor and a bush hog. The trails that I cannot go on with the tractor because there's a stream crossing or for whatever reason, we use a weed whacker and clear them back. The trails are all blazed with a yellow trail blaze so people can find their way around. They are signed. Dogs are allowed in the park on the trails, not at the picnic areas and beaches though. The trails are enjoyed in many ways. We have different trails. We have a self-guided wildflower walk with stations along the way with signs, pictures of the wildflowers, identifying the wildflowers that are there. The town office had their wellness group Nordic walk out there. We have a 1-mile fitness trail with 25 stations along the way. Sometimes I think I got the most exercise from that fitness trail. There's 44-something holes that were dug with cement filled, and I did most of them. People do come out and use them. Kids like to play on it. The Lisbon cross country team and the Christian area schools that have cross country teams enjoy the park trails. They have their annual meets out there. They often brag that the Beaver Park course is the best one in the state. It's the most realistic. It takes them through the woods, and it's used. They start when school starts in September till October. The kids are out there running. Trails and the park road are most of them anyway. The horses can go on, and sometimes even a buggy. The trails in the wintertime, I groom them for traditional cross-country skiing. Storms like we've had the past few days present a challenge. I have a snowmobile. I pull a drag. The chainsaw stays on the back with me because I never know what I'll come across. And as you can see, even though the trails are groomed in the fall and I cut back as much as I can and clean up any dead stuff that may come across, there's always stuff that falls across the trail. And pleasant surprise when I groom them. Here are the trails groomed. Skiers enjoying. I groom the trail on one side with the traditional cross-country ski track. It's wide enough to have snowshoers walk on the outside of that track and not destroy the ski trail. Sometimes I go out and I'll pack it down for them, or I'll go with the snowmobile and pack a track because the snowshoers like to have packed trail. Otherwise, they'll walk on the groomed ski track. So, and some of them adventure off on unbeaten path. We have a tot lot at the middle pond. That was one of my building projects when I first came. I think those were built in '85, the cabin and the other equipment. We have 2 ponds that are swimming ponds. We do not have a lifeguard. They swim at their own risk. The ponds are stocked with brook trout by the state, and we have bass that replenish themselves. Excellent place for fly fishing. We have an annual Beaver Park Fishing Derby. The Conservation Commission collects money from local merchants. We purchase fish to put in the pond for the fishing derby and divide prizes. Many of the anglers catch their first fish at Beaver Park. Those early lessons may last them a lifetime. When I have good ice and conditions aren't too difficult to keep the ice clean, we do have ice skating. We have 2 picnic shelters, one at the middle pond, one at the new pond, with grills that people can use with charcoal. We've had summer camp programs at the park. It's not a regular occurrence. I think we've had 3 or 4 different sessions. Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts use the park. They have an area that's designated for their camping. They also use the field for different activities. Lisbon schools and surrounding schools use the park for their field trips, for pond studies, environmental education. The physics class in Lisbon High School has been coming out for quite a few years now. The students are given cardboard, duct tape, and plastic. They have to build a boat, paddle it across the pond and back. Sometimes there's success. Everyone gets wet. We have different field activities. We have 2 ball diamonds. Girls, they're softball regulation fields. We've had the Schooner Fair concert out there. Kids use the fly kites, play soccer. And of course, one of the field activities is mowing. At the Lone Pine Lodge, we have different classes that take place there. The GPS class that the Maine Forest Service teaches. The Public Works had a chainsaw safety program at the park. Every year I teach wreath classes. We've been doing that for, I think, 27 years. I've been teaching wreath classes at Beaver Park. It's a very popular program. People start calling in September to sign up for a class in November. I cut all the brush in the park. I cut the full tree, bring the branches to cut the tips off at the building. The logs are used for signposts or firewood to heat the building. Everything's used when I cut these trees. As you can see, they're very proud of their wreaths. They like to display them. And there are people who come year after year, and they'll come as a group. They'll invite their family and friends, and then there's always new people. I average 9 classes, at least 15 to 20 people. Beaver Park has a lot of wildlife, birds, and wildflowers. The Stanton Bird Club comes to the park on Wednesdays at times during the summer, and when I can, I go for a walk with them. I'm amazed at what we have for birds. I know we have chickadees and nuthatchers and grosbeaks, but we have a scarlet tanager, and there's pileated woodpeckers, and there's lots to see out there. The great blue heron, in the morning when you go if you come out for a walk in the morning, you can usually see a great blue heron along the side of the pond. We have various wildlife, hawks, raccoons, turkeys, deer, porcupines. Weeds are only unwanted flowers. So our wildflowers, even milkweed, we want. So this is a beautiful milkweed plant. Painted trilliums. Lady slippers abound. June. It's difficult to walk through the woods and not step on a lady slipper. They are everywhere. And partridge, lots of different partridge berries. Beaver Park offers a peaceful getaway that's in your own backyard for people to enjoy. The park user fee, $1 per person per day if you live in Lisbon. Buy a family pass for $15. Last time I went to the movies, 2 of us couldn't go to the movies for $15. you can bring a whole family for a whole year for $15 to be in the park. If you live out of town, it's $3 or $30. When I'm away from the park, the Iron Ranger collects the fees. But the Iron Ranger doesn't chase them like I do. So, the park fees collected over the past 4 years. What I did was the blue is the total revenue that was collected, and the red is what was paid day use. The green is what was paid as a family pass. So I calculated how many family passes we sold. I subtracted that from our total, and that gave me the day use fees. And if you look at the last year, 2013-14, the daily passes and the revenue went down. And I think that is because that's when my job changed. I wasn't at Beaver Park as much. I've been in the gardens. Beaver Park has been on its own a lot more than it used to be. I wasn't there to chase the dollar. The Iron Ranger doesn't chase the dollar. People will go by, they'll put $1 when they should have put $9 in. Or, so most people are honest, but there are those who aren't. And that's what I contribute that decrease to. Also, we had a lot of rainy weather. And if it's not sunny and hot, you're not going to get them in the summer. And if it's not beautiful, sunny, and snow, you're not going to get them in the winter. Now for the town gardens, the other part of my duties. Lisbon currently has 47 gardens that we take care of in town, 3 cemeteries, and 21 garden volunteers, also known as Green Thumb Gang, help out with that. I think in your packet you have a list of all the town gardens and the volunteers or the staff that takes care of those gardens. One of the popular gardens that everyone sees on 196 is the gazebo garden. There are actually 6 gardens in this. We call it Gazebo Park, and it has 6 different garden spots. This is in Gazebo Park. Janice Browning takes care of this garden. We call it the Birdhouse Garden. The wagon, the flowering crabapple, Thomas Field Memorial. I'm just showing you a few of the garden spots. Last week we had a meeting with the garden volunteers in preparing for the coming year, and I made a PowerPoint program for them of all the gardens in town. So if you want to see that, I will be putting it on the town website. The town office, the enter and exit sign, you can see it looked pretty shabby. Paint was peeling off of it. Weed whackers had whacked at it. I painted it. I dug out a garden around it, planted some flowers, and you can see what little tender loving care and a few flowers, what a difference it made. We got a lot of compliments on these flowers last summer. There were 3 new gateway signs installed last summer. Mr. Eldridge had requested that I develop some gardens for those. The 196 between Lewiston and Lisbon, Pine Knoll has taken care of. The Route 9 has been adopted, and 125 had not been adopted. So the Parks Department and myself built this one. The 2 guys that worked for me last summer hauled the rocks, hauled the loom, and we gathered rocks wherever we could. We scrounged them. We didn't pay for any of them, and I built the garden, and then we planted it. I put in a few flowers for the fall, and this spring we'll do more to this garden. It's up for adoption if anyone wants it. It needs to be watered and planted in the spring. Watered a lot during the summer. I got my arborist license, so now I have to prune trees. And you can see the trees up top. Those have not been pruned. Many of our trees, our flowering crab apple trees, the pear trees, at Oak Street Park, at Smith McCarthy Park, at the town office, different areas had not been properly pruned for a number of years. So it's taken a while for me to get, I can't go in and cut them all up all at once, but they're coming. And there are some on Village Street that are gone. They're too mature. I can't do anything with those. But these are the these were at Smith McCarthy Park, and you can see before I pruned them and after I pruned them. And then I didn't kill it. It bloomed. It produced fruit. And so that was a success. Here's we have, as I said, there are 47 different garden spots, 3 cemeteries that we take care of, and these are lists of the volunteers and the staff that take care of the gardens. We had 2 big projects this summer that cost the town nothing. It didn't cost the taxpayers anything. Spectra Energy donated $1,000 and a day's volunteer work, and with that we painted the kiosk at the boat launch, at the Sabbatis River boat launch, sanded and painted the flagpole, painted the picnic tables, and added the new split rail fence. The treatment plant, people helped with, staff helped dig the post holes with the town, I don't know what they call it, bucket truck, and the volunteers installed the fence. Rita Furbish donated a bench in memory of her husband Roger Furbish, along with $1,435 to do improvements to a side trail off of the paper mill trail. The Public Works Department filled that area in that was wet, made a nice walking path down to the bench, and they also did some creative work and cut a stump out of the, I asked them to cut the tree, and they cut the tree and then made a seat out of the bench, out of the stump. And this bench is in a beautiful area. You sit there and you can see the river. The Parks Department, we built some steps, some terrace steps to the other end of this trail segment, and then added 30 yards of wood chips to cover roots and to make the trail safe and easier to walk on. Mrs. Furbish donated the money to do that. There are people enjoying the trail throughout all the seasons. The paper mill trail is our responsibility also, as far as mowing and maintaining it. Before the mowing crew starts in the summertime, I have projects for them. Last year we had 28 yards of mulch that had to be added to the gardens, and some of those gardens, the old stuff had to be removed before we could put the new stuff down. The trees along the Rickard section of the trail had been taking a beating from the mowers and weed whackers, so we went in and cut the sod, removed the sod from the base of the tree, and then put mulch on it so that it would just save them from the mower. There were 3 trees that died on the Rickard Trail. We replaced those. This is the mowing crew at work, Mark and Derek last year. Not only do they mow, but you have to talk and explain to the patrons who use the trails who see you out there. Some of the department goals, I'd like to have an automatic gate installed at the Beaver Park entrance so that people had to pay with a ticket of sorts before they could enter, pay before they enter. We'd like to revisit the Beaver Park fee system, ordinances, rules, and regulations. That hasn't been done since 1998. The fee system's longer. I'm working on cataloging all the town gardens and their specific needs and requirements, how to maintain them. Someday I'll be leaving. It'll be a lot easier for them, someone new to come in and know what has to be done, rather than fumbling through it as I'm doing now. I'd like to improve the Beaver Park tot lot, add some new equipment. It'd be great if we could have the environmental education programs at the park, more than 1 or 2 that I do a year, but something that's offered on a monthly basis to invite the general public and have programs for the schools to come to. Eventually build a greenhouse at the park so that we can grow our own annual plants instead of buying them. Offer summer youth camp programs. those are all things that are on a dream list and will require a lot more time and money. But those are things that I would like to see eventually at the park. Healthy parks, healthy people, and that's the end.
Thank you, Verla. Do we have any questions from council?
I just have one question real quick. Looking at your list of the gardens, it looks like you have, you said 47 gardens. I went through it, it looked like you are responsible for 25 of those.
That's why I'm not at Beaver Park.
That leads me to my question. What percentage or how many hours do you think a week do you spend working physically on the gardens, you know, out on the street?
Last summer, I don't know. Last summer, like I said, Beaver Park is open 365 days a year.
Mhm.
As long as I'm there, I'm responsible for the park. The way I'm not responsible is if I leave. So I have that. And then I have the gardens. And last year, I would spend at least 25 hours maybe in the gardens. At least half my time is spent in the gardens.
Okay.
And probably half at the park.
Thank you.
Everything got expanded.
Marilla, what, have you ever sat down with a scenario to figure out you would have to have some help, permanent help, but to have like walk-in camping and what would have to be done to the park to bring in that revenue? And I realize that you can't be there all the time, so somebody would have to be there. I understand that, but
That would, I have mixed feelings about that, about
Well, I realize
there's-
you have mixed feelings, but have you ever sat down and,
well, no, I think you'd want to do a feasibility study first of all. And it would really change the dynamics of the park as it is now. Is it going to make money? I don't know. You're going to have to invest a lot of money before you can have it make money.
right, you all,
And,
anything that makes money has to-
and definitely would have more than one full-time person
Right.
year-round. I mean, if that was something that the town wanted to pursue, then I would suggest a feasibility study. And it wouldn't only affect Beaver Park, it would affect the town, the police department, because, you know, you're not going to have Baxter Park people. You're going to have all kinds of people. And it's going to
And we
change
did-
things.
I mentioned this too, I think my first year on.
Yeah.
You really haven't why can't you have one pond in the wintertime for ice fishing?
We found this out big time. As it is, the ponds are not considered great ponds. They're considered part of a stream because they're each under 3 acres. They do not total 10 acres. If it was a 10-acre pond, it would be considered a pond. They are considered streams. Therefore, there's no ice fishing on streams. And that came from the Inland Fisheries and
That's
Wildlife.
state law.
Mr. Olmsted can add to it if he would like.
No, there was an issue of ice fishing that surfaced last week, and we received a call from a warden questioning the policies, and they wanted to look further into the issue of ice fishing at the ponds. They called me back on Thursday and said that the ponds really weren't ponds in accordance with their rules and regulations. They were considered streams, thus they were closed to all fishing from September 1 to April 1st.
So that's not my rule.
No, the state has more rules than we do.
They do enforce, the game wardens will enforce the fishing laws, though.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I always enjoy bragging about my work.
Doing a great job.
And if we can have the next item, please, Twyla?
Is the Finance Director's report?
That's not on the agenda that I have.
Me neither.
Oh. So the next report is the Finance Committee role in upcoming budget process.
We do have different
I
agendas.
don't have that.
agenda do we have?
I don't mind getting it. I know I have the paperwork in my,
I just downloaded this before I came, and it's not on here.
I just pulled it up from the live website.
Yeah, that's what this came off of.
That's okay. We need it.
Are you
You're on.
prepared to do it?
It won't be as exciting as the presentations you received tonight, but I will do my best to make it timely. Before you, you have my finance report for the month of January. To summarize revenues for you, January brought in $167,747. State revenue sharing is 57.75% collected at $329,000 year-to-date. Our four-year average collection rate at this point in the fiscal year is 56.6%. So again, what that means, from a percentage standpoint, we are on track, if not slightly ahead of the game, with our historical trends for collection. Keeping in mind that we, as I say, every month are on a reduced sharing plan with the state. Excise tax is 54.6% collected, with $658,000 year-to-date. And again, our four-year average collection rate at this point in the fiscal year is 52%. So we are slightly above that average collection. In January, we also received $5,000 for dispatch services from the towns of Greene and Durham, and $12,000 from the Before School and Fitness Center programs with the Recreation Department. January also brought in $6,545 from general assistance, and I believe that should that funding should bring us through June of 2013 for reimbursement. So, and that is what I have for you for revenues, unless you have some questions for me. Seeing none, moving on to expenses. The total expenditures for the month of January were $895,856. Of this, our personnel costs equated to $452,000, or 50%. This includes both wages and benefits. Benefits including the unemployment, workers' comp, and general liability insurances. Contractual services made up approximately 30% at $265,000. This is primarily due to our hydrant rental fees of $73,000. We made our TIF credit enhancement payments of $84,000. We had waste disposal fees of $18,000, legal fees of $15,000, revaluation services of $18,000, and streetlights of $10,000. We also incurred technology fees of $9,000, bus service of $8,000, and our town building expenses of $20,000, which again relates to our electricity, heating oil, natural gas, and telephone charges. Repairs and maintenance and supplies equated to just over 12%, or $110,000. This is primarily due to fuel purchases of $29,000 and our sand salt purchases for winter maintenance of $62,000. And that is my report on our expenditures. As a side note, as of January 31st, we have collected 51%, or $5.1 million of the total tax commitment. This is 1% less than where we were last year at this time. Tax bills will be mailed this week, so we should see collections increase over the next month. And that is all I have for you, unless you have questions for me. Council?
Jessica, how much is the sand salt bill overrunning what was?
As of this report, we were slightly overexpended. As a total budget for winter public works, we are still under expended, but the supply line, let me see if I can grab that real quick for you. The sand salt supplies, as of this report, January was about 18,000 overspent.
Do you happen to remember what we spent last year? Total?
I do not, but I can make a note to find out and let you know.
Okay. I was just trying to remember whether we used an average of what we've been using over the past few years, or I can't remember what we used as a guide for that.
Okay. Yep, I can make a note and let you know.
Awesome. Okay.
Either
Thank you.
through the course of the budget meetings or at the next council meeting.
Okay.
Jessica, does the Winter Public Works, does that include reimbursing Lewiston for borrowing some sand, not sand, some salt? Or do we still have to do that?
I am not positive if that individual invoice is part of this, but that will be where it shows up when it does get paid.
But we're just not sure if it's part of these numbers or not.
I'm not 100% sure if that invoice is included in this yet.
Do you know how much that was that we borrowed?
I do not.
Okay. Just didn't know if it was 5,000 or 15,000, that's all.
I will make a note and let you know.
Awesome, thanks.
You're welcome.
Anybody else? All right. Our next item, please, Twyla.
The Finance Committee's role in the upcoming budget process.
Okay. I think that we've been talking about the Finance Committee and what we, it's a relatively new committee for us, and what we would like to do with that. I think if we want to start the discussion with just outlining what we originally put the committee together for. I know that I was talking with Mr. Olmsted earlier today about it, and we just discussed you know, what the idea of having a finance committee is, and what we might need for those goals and for their goals and their. I think they need something to sink their teeth into, and they're looking for guidance from us. Councilor Pesky, I know that you were part of that conversation too. If you want to jump in anytime.
I'll jump in after you.
Thanks. Well, since I left my notebook over there, and you have your notebook right here, I'm going to steal yours.
Sure.
We got together just to make sure that we had notes from talking with Mr. Olmsted and getting some of his expertise and working with different committees of this sort. We were looking at the idea of moving in the direction of having our budget suggestions or recommendations from the Finance Committee. You know, what did we want to do with that? The Finance Committee is made up of all folks who we already put confidence in terms of budgeting, and who are all experienced in it and who all have strong backgrounds. So some of the ideas that we came up with and that we can discuss as council were the ideas of having the Finance Committee look at the current revenues. What do we have coming in as a good place to start? Let's take a look at the services that the town provides. Are there services that are not needed? Are there services that are needed? You know, what do we have looking at there? We also are looking at the possibility of saving money for the town by consolidating services, and if the Finance Committee could look at that from a numbers perspective, from a savings perspective, and maybe give us some heads up on that. And finally, we're discussing the budget in terms of a basic budget, not the dream budget that all of us would like to have, but the budget that we know that we have to work with, that maintenance, to maintain services as they are. We think that, maybe looking at that budget, are there gray areas? Are there areas that need to be more clearly defined in terms of spending? So those are just some ideas that we can start discussing. I think the Finance Committee is made up of a strong group of individuals, and we just we know that they can provide us with some guidance when it comes to working on the budget, but we need to tell them what we want them to do. So I'll open up council discussion.
I think one of the biggest pieces with this is, as a council, we need to give the Finance Committee a direction to go. If that, we are okay with a 50-cent increase, we don't want an increase, whatever it may be with the budget, and then give them a deadline of when they need to make the recommendations to the council. It could be scenario 1, scenario 2, and scenario 3 of how you can reach the goal that we have tasked them for. And then we can use those recommendations to go ahead with the budget that we want to have. But I think giving the Finance Committee clear direction, as they have asked for the council to give them, is the first step. But I think as a council, we're also going to need to figure out what we want. What do we want a 50-cent increase? Do we want to keep it flat? And then we can give them direction. So I think tonight's presentation from Mr. Olmsted will give us kind of an idea where we're going to start. And then I think as a council, we're going to need to have some serious discussion of where we want to go, because it is right around the corner.
I think one thing is that we have a time crunch. We have things to do. We have to get them done within a certain period of time. So making sure that we use the expertise of the Finance Committee, which is why we formed that committee, to help us meet that time deadline. And so if we're able to listen to Mr. Olmsted's presentation tonight, I know that he's going to cover a lot of points that are questions in our minds right now, help us to move the discussions forward. It sounds like we know we need them. We know that we have some ideas, and we need to clarify those ideas for ourselves, like you said, Dylan. I know that we have representatives of the Finance Committee here. If there's anyone who would like to add anything, if you have any questions you'd like us to consider.
Fern Larson, Lisbon Falls, on the committee. I think one of the goals that we were looking for is direction is if coming into the budget season, I mean, it's going to be our due responsibility to pay attention to what's happening, but if the council and school board would want us to make a recommendation at the first public hearing, I mean, I think that would be important information for us to have so we can actually meet that guideline to come in with a recommendation, whether it's to fall behind what your recommendations are as council to actually support it or actually help in that process. But I guess the group was looking for a end goal. What's our end goal this budget season? I mean, we actually meet, we go over a lot of information, but at some point in time we get to take that information that we actually take in and make some type of recommendation for it. And whether that's part of your process as you go through, or the idea of just being that third group of people at the first public hearing to actually make a recommendation and why we're doing that. So I think that'd be important if the idea of the council or the one of the council would be the idea at that public hearing for the finance group to be on board enough to make some type of recommendation, whether they support or have recommendations from the budget being presented that night. I think that'd be important just to them to know, so they would actually have that as a goal to achieve.
Great. Yeah, I think it's important that we keep in mind that we can only take advantage of our resources if we tell them what we want. So I think we don't have to take any action, right? This is just discussion. Right. Is that right? That's okay. So I know that I have some clear ideas of what I'd like to see coming out of the Finance Committee, and I think that maybe listening to Mr. Olmsted's presentation, we can maybe get everybody on the same page and be able to move forward with some recommendations. What we can do is create a timeline of exactly when we would like, in line with the hearings and everything else, when we can let the Finance Committee let us know what their recommendations are in time for us to not just say, oh, I think that's a good idea or I think it's a bad idea, but to incorporate those possibilities into the budget. So if we can put together a timeline, that sounds like it would accomplish a lot more in a timely fashion. Do we have any other input? Okay. I think we can move on to the next item. And
The next item is a discussion on the fiscal year 2015 budget challenges and opportunities.
This is going to be a presentation made by Jessica and myself. Jessica is going to really focus on budget challenges for fiscal year, help me, Jessica, 15?
Yes.
15. I haven't given a public presentation for 15 months, so there's going to be some rust involved here. 15 months ago, I said I'd never give another public presentation, but here we are. And so let's dig into it. The first thing I want to focus on is there's been a lot of discussion about the auditor's comment when he presented the audit to you folks this year. And I was asked if I could really sort of sort through what his comment really meant. And so Jessica was helpful in getting the comment down exactly as it was stated. And frankly, if an auditor in Freeport had made that statement publicly, I would have taken him out back and beat him about the head and shoulders. Because he made the statement, nobody understood it, nobody really knew what it was or what he was getting at. And it took me about 10 minutes once I talked to Jessica and emailed back and forth to the auditor to figure out what he was talking about. And he used the words unfavorable expenditure budget variance. Very interesting choice of words. What he was really talking about is the town's use of fund balance as a revenue source for the current operating budget. But in order to understand what that is, we have to talk about fund balance. So let's talk about fund balance. We're going to talk about what fund balance is, why do we have a fund balance, what should we have for a fund balance, meaning amount, and what do we have currently for a fund balance? So let's move on. And I'm sort of, I ad lib a bit, so you'll have to put up with that. And the other thing, I was told the other day that I was mentioning the word Freeport too much. And I'm sorry if that bugs some people, but that's all I know, because I spent my entire career, or just about my entire career there. And I am extremely proud of what we were able to do over that 30-year period in Freeport. And I can tell you that Freeport today has one of the best balance sheets of any town in the state of Maine. And it didn't happen overnight. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. And I will tell you, in my opinion, what Lisbon has to do to get there. But fund balance is a pool of money that falls out after all other accounts in your budget are accounted for. Fund balance is not designated for a specific purpose, but it does have a purpose. And the primary purpose of fund balance is to basically pay your weekly bills. You have to have an amount of money available to pay your bills. Keep in mind, your revenue stream comes in twice a year, May 15th and September 15th. March 15th.
March 15th.
All right.
It's late. I'm trying to keep up.
All right, March and September 15th. So that's when the bulk of your money comes in. Well, in between those two dates, you have to have cash available to pay your bills. And if you don't have cash available to pay your bills, you have one other choice, and you have to use something called tax anticipation notes, or TANs. When a town is borrowing money to pay their weekly bills, you're looking at a town that's in serious financial trouble. I'm not suggesting Lisbon is, but I can tell you right now that in talking with Jessica and looking at the sheets at the end of every week, you're getting close to having to talk about that dreadful word TAN. The other thing that fund balance is useful for is emergency needs. We lost a truck this week in a fire. Unfortunately, we do not have replacement cost. It's not insured for replacement cost. It's insured for actual value of truck the day that it burned. The only equipment that you have that's insured for replacement cost is the fire equipment, and I don't know why you separated fire equipment from all others, but when we determine the value of the truck as it burned and look at the cost of a new vehicle, there's going to be a dramatic difference. One would suspect that you would have to look at fund balance for that, or a used vehicle or something. We'll figure that out as we go. Now, fund balance changes every week. You can come in and ask what fund balance is today, and it'll be different tomorrow. Why is that? Because you paid weekly bills. You've signed a warrant. You've sent checks out. So fund balance fluctuates from day to day and week to week. What the auditor looks at is what fund balance is on June 30. You're on fiscal year, correct? So that's what matters to the auditors, where your fund balance is June 30. And typically, that could be probably the highest point of fund balance during the course of a year. Let's go to the next slide. This is more discussion on why we have an unassigned fund balance or fund balance. It's, again, we've talked about some of this. It's cash management. You have to manage your cash flow. The other thing fund balance helps determine is what your bond ratings are. Now, when I became manager of Freeport in 1982, Freeport did not have a bond rating. Both S&Ps and Moody's had pulled the town's bond rating. They did that for a number of reasons. Primary reason was town of Freeport spent all of its fund balance and spent every dime it had in reserves. This is nothing new. This has been well reported over the years. And the town was not only borrowing TANs to pay their bills, they were borrowing bands, or bond anticipation notes, to bond anything or buy anything. The town of Freeport was living totally on credit in 1982. The auditors were on the verge of closing our finance department and sending all of our collections to the town of Yarmouth because Freeport couldn't track their collections. I mean, the situation Freeport was in 82 is very unique. And I don't want to suggest that Lisbon is anything close to that because it isn't. Now, if you have a bond rating of, let's say, A, which is good, it would be like getting a C in school, you're going to pay a certain amount of money when you borrow. If you have a AA, a AAA, and then there are ratings in between those, you can get AA minus, AA plus, and so on and so forth. For every upgrade that you get in your bond rating, when you go to borrow, you're probably going to see an 1/8 to a 1/4 point in your favor. So keeping an adequate fund balance is critical for borrowing. It's critical. I have no idea what your current bond rating is. The bond ratings are usually assigned when you borrow. Either Standard & Poor's or Moody's will come in, look at your financial statements, look at your debt service, look at a number of things, and they'll assign you a bond rating. Again, pat myself on the back. Last time Freeport borrowed $14 million to build a new school. They had a AAA bond rating, the best that you can get. That probably saved them tens of thousands of dollars in debt over the term of the bond. And again, we've talked about the other use of fund balances for unforeseen expenditures or disasters. And again, we may have an example of that with the plow truck that is no longer with us. Best practices call for a fund balance of, I believe, 2 months of operating budget. Operating budget would be both combined town and school. and that is what, 20-some-odd million, Jessica? Yeah. And Jessica will go over those numbers. And I've jumped ahead, and we're already talking about the reason that you want a good, sound fund balance is you want to avoid borrowing to pay your weekly bills. When you get into that situation, again, you've got some serious financial troubles. Now, I'm going to share with the council something that you told me today, but right now, we're a month away from tax collection. Most people will pay their taxes the day or two before or on the day they're due. Very few people will pay in advance. So right now, we have very little cash available. And Jessica is working with a number of the vendors that we deal with, asking them to hold off on getting paid until we get cash floating in. I could argue that you should go out and borrow right now to pay some bills, but luckily we have some vendors that'll work with us. When I was in Freeport and we had a fund balance that was far too low, I had the luxury of going to L.O. Bean and asking them if they would pay their tax bill early, and they never denied me. And they were 20% of the total tax bill that we were about to collect. So we always had a way out. You don't have that big brother located in your community to help us out when we get into a pinch. But right now, we're struggling. We're struggling to pay the weekly warrants. And we're not going to have to borrow to do it. We'll get by. But it's a challenge. And then this is GFOA, which Jessica's far more familiar with than I am. This is a group of financial people who get in a room and make decisions on what fund balance really should be. And they're a mysterious group. I've gone to a couple of their meetings, and they talk a language that's really different than any other language you've ever heard. I mean, there's French, there's English, there's German, there's any number of languages. These people talk finance, and it's a strange language. Not too many people can understand it very well. I don't. I've been in this business for 36 years. But I understand it enough so if I listen long enough, I can maybe translate some of it into layman's terms. And that's why I went back to the comment that the auditor made to you, and he was never questioned about that comment. He was talking finance. It made perfect sense to him. It made sense to nobody else in the room except maybe Jessica. And I could have translated that had I been here for you, but I wasn't here at the time, so I'm doing it now. This was your slide.
It's okay.
I get on a roll and I just can't stop.
You can go right with it.
Now, are we going to talk about now what we have for a fund balance? And then we're going to circle back to the auditor, the comment made, and I'm going to translate that into a language that everyone can understand.
So as Dale just mentioned, the best practice that GFOA recommends is that we maintain an unassigned fund balance of no less than 2 months of our regular general revenue operating expenditures. So we should really be at a level no less than 2 months. And looking at this next slide, what this tells you is our balance as of June 30th, 2013, both town and school, our unassigned fund balance totaled $1,325,645. Our total operating budget for, again, both town and school was $22,663,915. Our fund balance, unassigned fund balance as a percent of our budget is only 5.85%. According to our town policy, section 86-1, we strive to maintain an unassigned fund balance of 12.5%. And that equates to $2,832,989, giving us a shortfall of $1,507,344, according to our policy that we try to strive to maintain. According to GFOA's best practice, our fund balance should be $5,439,340. Again, a shortfall of $4,113,695, according to the recommended best practice.
So, Jessica, in layman's terms,
we're short.
We should.
I think everybody got that.
Yeah, we should have about 12% fund balance. We currently have 6.
Correct.
But GOFA now recommends 17?
About 20. It's about 24.
About 24%.
Yep.
And Again, I pat myself on the back. Freeport does have 2 months fund balance at this time.
I'm gonna get some water.
Is this mine?
This is yours.
Okay. So we're going to go back to the comment that the auditor made, which, again, is finance speak. What the auditor basically should have said to you folks is, your fund balance is too low. You shouldn't use any portion of that as a revenue for next year's budget. And what the council decided to do, and there are valid reasons that you would do this, you decided to take $250,000 out of fund balance to put into the next year's budget as a revenue stream. And what the auditor was trying to say was, that's a bad idea, because your fund balance is too low. It had nothing to do with anybody buying a trinket or two or expending certain funds on certain items. It was simply his attempt to tell you that it was not a good idea to take money out of fund balance to offset your operating budget. Now, let me explain to you what Freeport does do. And they do it currently, or they better be doing it currently. They have a fund balance of 2 months. At the end of the year, or June 30, they determine if they have excess fund balance. And anything above the policy level, they will pull out and use it to offset expenses. But they usually, because they don't want to create what we call, or I call, a false revenue stream in your budget that can't be duplicated year to year to year, what Freeport will do is they will use those funds to purchase capital items, one-time purchases. So they don't rely on that for budgetary purposes. But many, many towns across the state do rely on fund balance annually to help offset the next year's operating budget. That's a common practice. But usually those towns have a much higher fund balance than Lisbon currently has.
And when this started, we did. We had a much higher, not quite at the levels that it probably should have been at that time either. However, we did have an adequate fund balance at the time this initially started, and it feeds into exactly what Dale is saying, is that we created that false revenue stream. Years and years ago when we started, we were initially pulling $500,000 out as a use of surplus every year for multiple years. When Steve came on board, he dropped that down to $250,000, and year after year, it becomes a dependency, like the state revenue sharing and things like that, where we've been trying to work towards becoming self-sufficient, and it's difficult when you create that dependency, and it's just no longer there. You know, we're pulling from something we no longer have the funding to pull from.
So you're going to have to find a way going forward to wean yourself from that.
Right.
You know, it may not happen in a single year, but if you can reduce your reliance on fund balance, it's simply going to make Lisbon a much healthier place financially.
In the years past, it hasn't been as big of an impact because we had sufficient overlay through the assessment and tax collection process. However, if you recall, the last couple years, we've only been putting just over $80,000 into overlay. So we've been putting in $80,000, but we've been taking out $250,000. So you can do the math.
But there are some, I think, untapped opportunities here.
Yep.
To improve the bottom line. And that's really what I want to focus on. Is it my turn yet, again?
Well, you can if you would like.
Did I jump over anything?
No, I think you hit it.
Oh, well, I want you to talk about this because this is important before I get into my opportunities.
All right. So this coming year, this is not the budget presentation to you. I just want to make you aware of some things while I have you in this forum. For this next year's coming budget challenges, you're going to come up against some uncontrollable expenses as we do every year. We have our health insurance, unemployment, retirement, Social Security. This year we're running into the animal control officer shelter fees. Our county tax, we have some trail matches that we have to honor, and we have our lease and or bond payments. Those are all uncontrollable costs that we have to maintain within the budget. And what we're looking at this year is an approximate total uncontrollable increase of $196,000. So right from the get-go, we're looking at an increase to this year's budget of $196,000. In addition, we are also looking at a potential revenue sharing raid. The state revenue sharing is scheduled to be rated again, or yet again, in fiscal year 15. I had some new information today, so this is, I'll read this and then I'll tell you what that is. The legislative plan was to have another 8% reduction in revenue sharing, reducing our portion to $529,000. That's a rate of about $50,000. And then there's the governor's plan, which was going to rate another 69% reduction to revenue sharing, which would reduce our portion to $176,000, which would cut us an additional $390,000. The legislative bodies passed in the House. They passed their plan. The House passed 120 to 17, and in the Senate there was no roll call. So that's good news because it means they may only cut it $50,000. It is on the governor's desk. He has, I believe, until February 23rd to make a decision of whether he's going to veto it or not. If he vetoes it, it can still be overturned, and this is where I get a little sketchy on the whole process because I'm new to this as well. But my understanding is that if he vetoes it, it can still pass, and given the numbers that this plan did pass by, it should maintain. However, I read some papers that said the Republican Party has been known to change their vote to follow the governor's veto when that does come about. So whether that will have a large enough impact to overturn what the legislature has passed and go with the governor's plan, hopefully we'll know before the budget presentation to you on the 4th. But as it stands right now, the legislative plan did pass, which, knock on wood, is a better thing for us.
If I could step back and ask a question, does everyone understand what revenue sharing is? All right.
And then the other budget challenge, as Dale and I have been discussing through this whole presentation, is our designated use of surplus and the need to discontinue that use of $250,000.
So, and I don't think we have we're not totaling these numbers yet.
No.
But assuming that we're correct and that we have, around $200,000 of fixed costs increases, assuming that the legislature would override the governor's veto, and I think they will, because that's a wide margin, 120 to 17. And then the Senate, there was no roll call because it was a voice vote. So we think every senator voted to restore most of the revenue sharing that the governor wanted to cut. I think it's fairly safe that we won't incur that type of hit. But I'm going to say we got $200,000 on the expense side to produce a maintenance budget. We've got $50,000 loss in revenue sharing, so now we're at $250,000. And if the council chose not to tap fund balance going forward as a revenue for the operating budget, you're $500,000 down before you're out of the gate. So how do we offset some of that? Well, it's got to be offset on budget cuts or revenues. And I want to throw out some ideas. And I'll come up with more ideas as we go. I'm meeting with department heads tomorrow in pretty much an all-day session to start going through the budget proposal. And at this point, I don't know a lot about your budget or what's in it, but after tomorrow I'll know a whole lot more, and I'll probably come up with more ideas. But and I can assure you there's something on that list for everyone to hate. These are tough discussions that communities have to have. So let me explain some of these. We have Time Warner providing cable service in this town, but we have no franchise agreement or we have no franchise fees coming in. And I found that shocking when I took the job, found that out the second day. And why that's the case, I don't know. It doesn't, looking in the rearview mirror doesn't really provide a lot of assistance. I think you have to look going forward, but we should have a franchise agreement with Time Warner, and we should be collecting a 5% fee. In other words, they take their gross revenue stream, they have to reveal that to us on a quarterly basis and give us 5%. And when I mentioned this to a couple of folks, they said, well, gee whiz, if we get a 5% franchise fee, they're simply going to raise their rates and pass that on to the customer. Well, I knew that wasn't the case, so I had a little survey conducted, and I'm going to pass this around. I forgot to copy it, and you can all look at it. This compares 6 Time Warner towns in the area. 5 of the towns get a 5% franchise fee. 1 doesn't, and that's Lisbon. And lo and behold, they have the exact same rates for cable service. So the 5% that should be going to Lisbon is going into the pocket of Time Warner. They're loving you guys. I mean, they think Lisbon's just the greatest place on earth. My estimation, based on Freeport's experience, is the town's losing between $60,000 and $75,000 a year because you're not getting this fee. So I'm going to, before the week's over, call Time Warner and ask them to begin discussing with us a franchise agreement, and also ask them if they would institute the fee immediately. When it's very common for a cable company, either Comcast or Time Warner, to provide that fee even though you don't have a franchise agreement. But the understanding will be that you will move towards a franchise agreement. Now, 2 years ago, the state of Maine, there were a lot of towns that allowed their franchise agreements to expire because they simply couldn't agree at the bargaining table on the terms of a new agreement. And the state of Maine realized the difficulty that the companies and municipalities were having in putting these new agreements together. So the state said that they were going to engage all the stakeholders into a discussion at the state level and hopefully come out with a model franchise agreement. So Freeport had an expired franchise agreement, and we got together with Comcast and said, okay, let's wait to see what the template looks like. Let's wait to see what the model state agreement looks like. And hopefully it'll be an agreement that all towns and all companies can accept, you know, with some modification based on the needs of each town. So our agreement expired, and I went to Comcast and said, but we will continue the franchise fee, correct? I did that, Falmouth did that, Cumberland did that, Yarmouth did that, Brunswick did that, and in each and every case we were told, not a problem. We all have the intent to renew, we're all in this holding pattern, we'll continue to pay the fee. So the franchise fees were never in question in those communities. They continue to get the fee. But it's getting a new franchise agreement is going to take some time. You have to go through what's called an ascertainment period. And during that period, you have to determine what your needs are. Because in addition to the fee that you will negotiate at 5%, that's standard, you can also get grants from the companies. You can get grants to use for general funds. You can get grants to buy new equipment. You can get grants to hire personnel. You can do any number of things. Now, if you look at that sheet that I passed around, you'll see that one town got a huge grant.
Yeah, I see that.
The towns that didn't get any grants probably didn't really have any needs. When I negotiated the last contract in Freeport, and that was just before I left when I signed it, Freeport asked that all streets be wired, and some streets weren't. Some of the newer streets didn't have cable or cable wiring. Company agreed to that. Freeport asked that we have 5 insertion points around the community. An insertion point is a place where you can go plug a camera in and televise live from is Verla left? But we could have an insertion point at the park, and she could have activities there and broadcast them live over the television. Freeport got 5 insertion points. They're not cheap, but the company agreed to put them in for us. And then we had a need for some new equipment, and we got a grant of $30,000 from the company to buy all new equipment. So it's going to take some time and a committee that the council should put together. And on the committee, you should have some people knowledgeable of the field. Luckily, in Freeport, we had a couple of people in broadcasting who lived in the community. We had someone who had previously worked for a cable company. They became the committee because they knew the business. And they sat down with the cable coordinator and hammered out what our needs were, and then we went to the bargaining table and struck the deal. Once we knew what our needs were, and because we weren't being outrageous with our needs, we had legitimate needs that we could quantify, we settled in 2 weeks. It was done, and we had our agreement in place. But there's money, there's a substantial amount of money there that the town should look for. Number two is update and approve the current fee schedule. I've found in talking to some of the administrators that the fees we're charging haven't been updated in years, that we're not covering the cost of providing the service. So I'm going to give an example that's probably way off base, but it's one that, again, pertains to Freeport. We were issuing planning board permits. We had to, and they were $50 for a certain permit. But to get that permit, we had to advertise twice in the paper. We had staff time involved. So we went through a process of determining what it was really costing the town to issue that permit. And the cost was between $400 and $500, and we were charging $50. So who was paying the difference? The property taxpayer was paying the difference. So we agreed in Freeport many years ago that at least every other year we would look at the entire fee and, we called it a fee and fine schedule. It would be presented to the council with the operating budget, and that we would keep that up to date. We would look at what surrounding communities were charging, and we'd also look at our actual costs. And our goal was to make sure that the applicant was paying the fees and not the general property taxpayer. I suspect there's a fair amount of money that we could raise if we updated our fee-fine schedule to at least cover the town's costs of providing the service. Now, number three is a real fun one. I've been down this road a few times. This is solid waste, and it's called a pay-per-bag system. The town currently budgets $260,000 annually to pay the tipping fee at Lewiston, Auburn. You take it to MWAC, I believe.
Yes.
Right. Now, many towns, and I would say the vast majority of towns in the southern Maine area, have gone to what they call a pay-per-bag system, where the resident will buy a bag at a grocery store, and it's a colored bag, colored to your town, and that the fee for the bag will pay the cost of disposal, and it comes completely out of the town budget. I would suggest to you that it's a fairer system because you pay for what you use, or you pay for the amount of waste you produce, and you have an opportunity to cut your expense by recycling as much as possible. In towns that have gone to a pay-per-bag system, recycling has gone through the ceiling because people don't want to buy those blue bags or green bags or yellow bags. They recycle a heck of a lot more. The money comes out of the town budget, and it was a savings for many people in the town, and it reduced the tax rate, or it should. What councils really have to accept when they go to a pay-per-bag system is they're not going to spend the money somewhere else. They're going to reduce the tax burden as a result. They've got to show the taxpayer that there's a savings. And if the taxpayer wants to manage your waste well, there's even a further savings. Number 5 is something that we did in Freeport. It was very controversial. It took years to get in place. Some of these things take time. But we had our own emergency management service, our own ambulances for 911 calls. When I was in Caribou years and years ago, Caribou adopted a non-emergency transport program. That's where the real money is. Transporting someone to dialysis, transporting someone for a non-emergency service to a healthcare facility. Freeport was having a debate about whether or not to hire full-time firefighters. And I can tell you that I was shocked and pleasantly surprised to come here and find out that you still have, by and large, a call force. Now, they get paid when they're called, but they're not full-time, very expensive. You're very fortunate that you haven't gone down that road. Freeport, I wasn't a big fan of this, but at the end of the day, councils decided to go down the road of hiring full-time firemen. And this created a lot of interesting discussions between the fire chief and I. Not overly friendly discussions, but we got through them. And so I challenged the chief to come up with a way to pay for these full-time firemen that he wanted. And I shared my experience in Caribou with this non-emergency service that was very effective and produced a lot of revenue. So after doing a lot of investigation and talking with the council about beginning this service, we did. And it took a capital investment to get there, but we generated enough money to pay for 3 full-time salaries in the fire department. So it worked. Now, the private sector was unhappy with us, but what we did to make sure that we were going to generate the business that we needed, before we started the service, we went out and got contracts with Parkview Hospital in Brunswick, all the nursing homes in Yarmouth and Freeport. So when we put that first net ambulance on the road, or that first net vehicle, we had signed contracts with healthcare facilities, and we knew that we could make the numbers work. Since then, the program has grown. So another idea. Now, you don't have an emergency service, so it would be a little more complicated here, but again, these aren't things that you should shy away from discussing. Now, I've been trying to find out when there's a fire and the business or homeowner has fire insurance on the property, are we billing the insurance company for our services? I don't think we are. We should be. Fire insurance companies will pay for those services. And in Freeport, we keep close track of how many people went, how long they were there, what our cost was, and we bill the insurance companies, and they'll pay it. Number 7 is town office operating hours. Now, I'll be honest with you, there's not a lot of savings here. There's some utility savings, but in Freeport, we did this 15 years ago because we wanted to provide a better service to the customer. And we had a group of residents come to us and say, your office hours are terrible. You know, we have jobs, you're open at 8 and you close at 5, and that's when we go to work, and we leave work at 5. We have to take time off to come in here. So can't you help us out? So the council said, yeah, we'll think about it. So they looked at me and said, figure this out. So what I did was we conducted a 3-month survey, and we passed survey sheets out to everybody that walked in the building. If we were to go to a 4-day work, would that work for you, and what hours would work for you? And we got a lot of response back. Very few of the people that responded said a 4-day work wouldn't a 4-day work week would not work. It's late and I'm getting tired and I'm older than I used to be. So anyway, so we brought all this information back to the council. At the same time we were taking surveys, we were counting bodies that walked into town hall for business. And we determined from the surveys that people would like extended hours in the morning and at night. And we learned in the survey that Friday was our slowest day of the week. Now, not necessarily for every department, but overall it was the slowest day at town hall. So I went back to the council with all the information and said, let's try for 6 months a 4-day work week. Let's open at 7:30 in the morning, giving people a half hour before they go to work. And let's stay open until 6 at night, giving everyone an hour after they get out of work to come in to town hall and do their business, and close Friday and see how it goes. We did that for 6 months. Our busiest hour of the day was 5 to 6, hands down. People loved being able to leave their place of employment, drive to town hall, register their car, and go home. And we had a few people come in at 7:30 on their way to work. At the end of 6 months, a public hearing was held. 6 or 7 people came to the public hearing. Everyone spoke in favor of continuing. That's all the council needed to hear, and Freeport has been on that schedule for 15 years, and they would never go back to a 5-day work week. The efficiencies we created internally were there were 2 less breaks. We cut out a lunch hour on Fridays. We cut out 2 breaks on Fridays. We did save on utilities. We had a more efficient staff. We had less downtime. The public loved it, and a number of towns since Freeport did it have gone to it. Cape Elizabeth, Cumberland, 2 that I, off the top of my head, can think of. Some other towns have gone to a 4.5-day week, providing some extended hours 2 or 3 days a week and then closing down half a day Friday. But it's something that is worth talking about. Review and adopt appropriate financial policies. I've looked at your financial policies. I've compared them to what I was used to in Freeport, and don't take this the wrong way, but your policies are woefully inadequate. You don't have enough policy. and the policies you have haven't been updated in a long time. And something that I can do for you while I'm here is engage you in a dialogue about what appropriate financial policies look like. And I can share with you policies from towns like Freeport and Falmouth who have very similar policies, and Yarmouth and Cumberland. If you look at their policies, they're far more detailed. They have more of them than Lisbon does. And I can tell you that in 1982 in Freeport, when we were in the mess we were in, and we had state auditors threatening to close our doors, and we had local auditors who said our books in such disarray they couldn't audit them, and the town went for 3 years without a qualified audit, which was not a good place to be. What the council did was committed themselves to policy discussion. How can we ever prevent this from happening in the future? And it took a long time. It took a year for that council to get through these discussions. They had the auditors come in, they had state auditors come in, they had financial experts come in, bond counsel come in, but we got through it. And we have incredible policies on the books. I keep saying we like I'm still there. Freeport has incredible policies on the books, but once they adopted the policies, it took them 20 years to get there. It didn't happen overnight. It was small steps each year that they made to get to the goal. And 20 years later, they got to the goal. I mean, every year they committed a little bit more to getting there. And I did it with 3 incredible finance directors, and I did it with council after council after council who bought into the idea that we got to get as financially strong as we can. So it worked. But if you go down this road, don't expect instant results. I could get you there in 1 year, but it would be so painful that none of you would get reelected. I can guarantee you. On to the next one. Ryan talked about stormwater fees. That's something that literally every community in Maine of our size and over are talking about. It's going to be this is going to be an expense that someone's going to bear. So it's either going to be the property owner or the general taxpayer. But those new stormwater regulations are going to be costly. The last thing I put down, and I even, as presentations were being given today, wrote a couple more things down. Consolidation of services, internally and externally. I've already had a discussion with the superintendent about this. He wants to engage the town in dialogue. I know that there's been past dialogue, but I think there are some things that we can look at that we haven't looked at before. I think that there can be we can look at internal consolidation. Is there duplication within the system? And my guess is there is some. How much it'll save, I have no idea. How much external consolidation might save, I don't know. But it needs to be investigated. We spent a lot of time at Freeport talking about this. We consolidated dispatch, which saved the town over $100,000 a year. Our dispatch service went to Brunswick. You can dispatch from anywhere. A 911 call can come from New Hampshire. It doesn't matter. It really doesn't. Now, when we lost our dispatch service, the public did lose some direct contact with dispatch and PD, but the savings was sufficient enough for the council to make that decision. Now, and the other thing that Freeport faced at the time was we didn't have a lot of redundancy in the system. We had situations where a single dispatcher was on during the midnight shift, and if multiple calls had come in, we'd have been in a pickle. So when we went to Brunswick, that issue went away. But the other thing we consolidated with the town of Yarmouth was general assistance. We didn't have enough general assistance in either town to merit a full-time person, but we each had a full-time person. So we basically were able to reduce a position and consolidate general assistance. Those were really the only 2 successes Freeport had. We had a third success. I shouldn't say this. We consolidated vehicle maintenance with the school department. We do the maintenance on their school buses. They don't farm that out as they used to. There was a lot more we talked about, but anytime you talk about consolidation, it becomes very political. Administrators get very protective of their departments. These are tough discussions to have, but you have to have them. And if you don't have them, your tax bills are going to simply go up and up and up. Now, in Freeport, one year I put out a list like this, and as sort of a joke, I put an item on the list, which was close the library, and buy everyone a Kindle. Now, the head librarian didn't like that idea.
Good thing she's gone.
And unfortunately, and I said, look, I'm just kidding, guys. And unfortunately, the Portland Press Herald reported it. And I had over 200 emails from librarians across the state, and they weren't friendly emails. And I learned that librarians can be a vicious group of people. So I'll never talk about libraries again. But I had to ask my librarian, Beth Edmonds, to call the dogs off. I mean, my mailbox was just full. But a couple of other things that I was thinking about as we were, as the department heads were talking about their departments, was another thing we did in Freeport, which people thought wouldn't work, but it did, is we kept having people come into town who were just thrilled that the fire department responded quickly and put out a fire and so on, and can't I do something? Well, in sitting down with department heads, and I know there's certain departments that can't solicit donations, unfortunately, but most of your departments can. I said, why don't we do an annual fundraiser? Why don't we, in October, November, right around Christmas time, when people are feeling cheerful and giving, why don't we send out a fundraiser saying, look, if you want to donate extra money to the fire department or the library, or whatever department you choose, let's give people the opportunity to do that. So we sent out a letter of solicitation, and the first year we raised over $25,000. And we found that a lot of people are willing, they're looking for the tax deduction, they want to support their community. They were writing out $25, $50 checks as donations to the fire department, as donations to the library. And Freeport continues to do that year after year, and each year the amount donated grows. So there are things like that that produce results, and if nothing more in the short time I'm here, I hope to give you lots of things to think about and talk about even after I'm gone. So these are some opportunities that I would suggest that you start thinking about.
That's all we have.
Are we done?
That's it.
And my apologies, but once I get rolling, I tend to have a hard time shutting down.
Do we have any questions, Mr. Olmsted?
I do. We was talking about revenue sharing. That's not the same year after year. So how do towns plan on budgeting something like that?
Well, unfortunately, it's supposed to be the same.
Shouldn't even be in a budget, should
Right.
it?
The state constitution requires that 5% of revenue sharing collected by the state go back to municipalities. Keep in mind, the money is raised in municipalities. It's primarily sales tax. There's a few other things in the pot. The original concept of revenue sharing was to recognize the fact that it costs towns to generate this revenue for the state. And I'm going to again mention Freeport, but when Freeport has, for a 3-month period, 40 to 50,000 people daily coming into that town, there's an expense for the town. But every time they buy a shirt, that 5% or 6% goes to the state. So many years ago, the state said, we need to recognize the expense the towns incur to generate our revenue, so we're going to give the towns back 5% to help offset those costs. Well, the trouble is, the state gets into situations and they don't want to raise taxes at their level, so what the hell? What the heck? Let's cut revenue sharing, and let's force the property taxpayer to pay more at the local level. And I don't know how many times that I went to Augusta to fight against cuts in revenue sharing, and I can't tell you how many town councilors we sent to Augusta from Freeport, and I don't know what they feed them up there. But when they were a town councilor, they understood how important revenue sharing was and why we were getting it. And then they would go to Augusta and vote to cut it. And we need another layer of government below municipalities. We need to create one, so when we get cut, we can pass down to that lower level the reduction. Because we're at the bottom of the hill and it all runs downhill. So right now, with the proposed cut of 8% the legislature's making, we're only going to get 3.5% of that pie, where it should be 5%, and that pie should grow every year. So, I mean, I can remember our governor, when he was the mayor of Waterville, standing up at a public meeting and just bashing state officials for cutting revenue sharing. And I think he drank or ate the Kool-Aid when he got up there, because all of a sudden it's okay.
Any other questions? Thank you for that presentation, Dale and Jessica. It gives us a lot to think about and sort of puts things into a little bit of perspective for us. We have a lot of workshops coming up for the budget, and a lot to think about. I'll work with Dale on putting together an agenda that will, for our next meeting, that will address the kind of direction that we want to move forward in, and maybe we can even talk about it at a workshop along the way. So whatever works best for schedules. And I think we've all been here plenty long enough. Don't you?
I'm good. Second that.
All right.
Past our pumpkin time.
We have the next item.
Which is new business.
Okay, this is the opportunity for audience members to comment or question on something that wasn't covered in the agenda. Is there anyone who'd like to speak?
It's late. I'm anxious to get home, as everyone else, but Mr. Olmsted's comment, the last one on a fundraiser, that was interesting. My son in Litchfield had a chimney fire. He has a probably mid-1800s old farmhouse with an attached barn, no insurance because the insurance companies won't touch anything with an attached barn. He's got about 12, 15 head of cattle. I was terrified driving out there. Litchfield Fire Department was fast on the scene and took care of his chimney fire with no damage other than a little bit of smoke. I was so appreciative. I'm not rich. I'm struggling probably more than a lot of other people, but I send a $100 donation to the Litchfield Fire Department in appreciation. It was just, I just felt that it was something that I had to do. And kind of on a light note, the Route 196 Master Plan, we heard a week or so ago from Mark Stevens, the Recreation Department. We heard tonight from our wonderful librarian, all of the services they offer. We heard from Verla Brooks, all of the things that she does, Beaver Park and all of our gardens. I can't think of any reason, better reason, why a company, a business, a manufacturer would not want to come to Lisbon with all of these things that we have to offer, all of these wonderful, wonderful things that we have to offer from tots, kindergarten, all the way up to senior citizens, all of the wonderful resources that we have, the gems that we have in the town of Lisbon. This is Lisbon. This is the people of the town of Lisbon and the wonderful people that work and do things for us. Just our biggest asset.
Thank you, Doc. Is there anybody else? Nope.
I just figured, since I have the opportunity to follow up and address your comment on how we handled the Lewiston salt, we will not be receiving an invoice from them. We actually return salt from the next purchase that we made from the barn. So I found that out. Just thought I'd let you know while we're still in the same meeting.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Larry Fillmore from Lisbon. I think we've had enough tonight. Can we just move on to adjourn? You're already past the
I know.
half hour and it's still snowing. I think it would be nice if we all got out of here and just skip the rest of it and just go on.
Larry, I got something to say, so ha ha ha.
Yeah, but Larry's allowed to leave if he wants to. So.
This is true.
If there's no other comment or questions, our next item, Twyla?
Council Communications.
Roger?
I'm going to direct this to Fern. I don't think there's anybody on this council that wants to give money for a trail system more than me. And I would love to write the check right now and hand it to you.
You can? No.
But also, I've got a little project that I'd like to see go up Main Street, and that should help a lot of people too. As, maybe even more than the sidewalk down on Davis Street. But it's going to be a hard one for me. I don't know how we can split the money and make everybody happy, you know?
We'll have
Cable fees, maybe.
cable
We
fees.
gotta get the money first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank
Okay.
you, Roger. Okay. Anyone else? All right. Our next item, Twyla?
We did the appointments. Let's see, there's no counselor communications?
Well, we already
We
did
did
that.
council response, counselor communications, about the same thing, or?
Yeah, it was tonight.
I don't think we have any other responses, and I think we're all set. I think everybody's
There's
tired.
No
there, but it's
executive
an
session,
update.
so to adjourn?
I
Make the
will-
motion to adjourn.
I'll second it.
All those in favor?
Okay, motion passed, 5-0.
Hey, Dan, is it possible to get a copy of that PowerPoint that Jessica, or or you and Jessica?
We need to sign
Is it,
a
well, is
couple
it digital?
things.
Yep.
Can I get this digital somehow?
Twyla?
Sure. Yeah,
I
that would
didn't
be
know
better.
that.
You want, okay, yeah.
You should